Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. Welcome to TechStrong TV. Today is Thursday, October 29th. You know, a lot of big things going on. There's a big day coming up here in the U.S. A lot of people lining up and getting ready for it. No, I'm not talking about Election Day. I'm talking about Halloween this Saturday. It's going to be a different Halloween. I don't know how many trick-or-treaters to expect. Got to be careful putting out candy. Got to be careful who's touching the candy. In our house, I think we're going to be packing candy in bags and doing it that way. It's crazy. But nevertheless, Halloween is a great holiday, and we enjoy it. Celebrating Halloween, just a quick heads up, on Friday, October 30th, we have a live roundtable on our DevOps Unbound show. And we're all going to be in costume. It's the Ghosts, Ghouls, and Goblins of DevOps. And I have an amazing lineup. I have Mitchell Ashley, my co-host from Accelerated Strategies Group, joining me. But we also have the one and only Derek Weeks Tweaked. Derek of Sonatype, All Day DevOps, DevSecOps Days will be joining us. Jasmine James, formerly of the DevOps Center of Excellence at Delta, and now at Twitter. Is going to be joining us with regale us with some tales there. Who else? Tracy Reagan, CEO of Deploy Hub and board member of CDF, as well as we have two gentlemen from Tricentis joining us. One is their VP of engineering, and it's going to be a great show. We're all coming in costume. I heard a rumor that the hippy dippy DevOps dude will be moderating. So join us for that. You can register right now. You do need to register to join. It is free, though. And if you go over to devops.com and click on webinars, you'll see the roundtable up there. Or you can go to devopsunbound.com, and I think you can reach it through the website there as well. So join us there Friday, October 30th. I want to say it's at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Anyway, for today, we've got a great show lined up. Let me tell you who we're interviewing. Number one, I have an analyst from GigaOM, John Collins, who's been an analyst for years, as well as a practitioner and everything else. John has a new report out on DevSecOps, and he's going to go through it with us and give us some highlights. After that, speaking of analysts, I have the one and only Mike Rothman. Mike, of course, is a founder at Securosis, security analysis firm, as well as a founder at DisruptOps, cloud security, DevSecOps. And Mike and I spent a good half hour talking about the mythical security champion. Are they born or are they made? What is the state of DevSecOps and more? So check out my conversation with Mikey. After that, I'm happy to introduce you to Mark Traster of Progress Software. Most of you know that Progress Software acquired Chef a few months ago, and they're just about to release the first Chef release since the acquisition. And we're going to talk with Mark about that and what the future holds there for a Chef, as the Chef product line integrates into Progress's existing line, and what we can expect to see there. Then after that, we have a Cyber Heroes Adventure episode with the one and only Gary Berman. And today's episode asks, how do you use stories to distill complicated cybersecurity information into digestible bites? That's with a Y. I think you'll enjoy it. And then after that, we'll turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our Chief Content Officer, Managing Editor at MediaOps. And Charlene will have today's news from around the MediaOps sites, as well as a great interview with Keith Wozicek and Christopher Ballard from Knoll. And that should be a good one. And then Charlene will also have a webinar preview of what to expect for the rest of this week and early next week on our MediaOps webinars. After that, I'll be back just to introduce Mitch at the Analyst Corner. Mitchell Ashley has two good videos for us today. One is Venkat Verkasian, CEO of Rockset, and interesting story there. Mitchell has all about it. And then Mitchell also has another great video with Kawisk, and I'm not going to pronounce his last name well, Guruswamy. He is with Menlo Security, one of the leaders in security isolation, and Mike Hatcher of Bylight Professional Services. That's a good interview there with Mitchell. And then we're going to go over for a quick channel roundup. Only a single dose of it today, though. We have Mike Vizard, who's working on his camera equipment, from what I hear. And Mike's interview today is with Ruth Sahul, Director of the Open Source Program Office for Red Hat. And that should be a good one as well. And I'll be back to wrap it up after that. It's probably a good 3 hours worth, almost 3 hours worth of content today for a Thursday. We hope you're enjoying it. You're safe and well. Let's take a commercial break and come back with our first guest.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right. As I mentioned, our first guest today is an analyst from the GigaOM project. John Collins has been pounding the analyst beat for a number of years. He's in the middle of a series of reports that are very DevOps focused. This one is on DevSecOps, and John's going to tell us and share with us some of the findings and his analysis of them. Here now is John Collins from GigaOM.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another segment here on TechStrong TV. We have a first-time guest for today's segment. His name is John Collins. John, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hey, looking forward to it.
Thank you for being on with us, John. John, I didn't introduce your company title or anything. I'm going to let you share with the audience.
Okay, so I'm a Vice President of Research at GigaOM, which many people may know as a media company. We used to have a lot of journalists, but we've rebooted as an analyst firm. And key fact is it's very practitioner led. So we've got a lot of people that do stuff during the day, and then they write for us at night, and that's what keeps us regular.
You know what? I love that model. Of course, many of us in the security world were bummed. I guess it was last week, or maybe it was the week before. Our friends at NSS Labs closed. They weren't an analyst firm, but a real, one of the few testing labs left, right? And after a bunch of years, yeah, it had been, it's a long story, and then maybe that's for another interview we can talk about it. But it's good. I remember when GigaOM sort of rebooted and with this analyst kind of model, and I love it. John, what about you personally? What's your background?
So started as a developer, but that was a long time ago. And I went through a phase of being a software configuration management manager, and I was working on so I don't know if you remember, there was a book called Peopleware by Tom DeMarco, and I read that when I was a developer, and I thought that's just fiction. And then I joined my next company, which was Alcatel, and every single bad thing that him and Timothy Lister documented in that book turned out to be absolute fact. So I learned a great deal from that, and I ended up running all their IT systems, Unix systems and databases and the software tools. And then I went on to be a consultant for a while, and I was doing security, and then I did ITIL stuff as well. And so fast forward, I then discovered this thing called being an analyst, where you don't break anything anymore. No one shouts at you. And I love that. And then fast forward like to 2 years ago, and I first heard this term DevSecOps, and it was like my entire career in an acronym. It's just perfect, because it's everything I used to do. So still getting my head around it, but that brings us up to date.
Yeah. So, truth be told, and I've said this before, I was first attracted to DevOps because my background was in security, and I thought DevOps represented, the last great hope, or the new hope, to quote Star Wars, right? For security, that maybe we could get it right and make right a lot of wrongs that had transpired over the DevSecOps then, right? But, then we went through this rugged DevOps period where it was kind of called rugged DevOps, James Wickett, a few other folks, and Gene Kim and Josh Corman. And look, I've been putting on a DevSecOps, as it came to be called, event at RSA conference for the last 5 years. Hopefully this year will be 6 years. We'll see what form it takes, but that's another story. So I agree with you. I looked at that and said, man, this is what we need. This is the game changer. We've made tremendous progress, but there's still tremendous progress that needs to be made. But you recently had a report on it. Let's talk. Let's dive in.
Yeah, I did, and I'm gonna put my cards on the table, really. So I've been writing a series of reports. If I inject a little bit of narcissism into this, I actually stopped being an analyst for a while because I just got so bored of having an opinion about everything. And people would call me up and say, "What do you think about so and so merging with so and so?" And I think, I don't even know who they are, but I've got to come.
I'll give you an opinion anyway.
Yeah, I need an opinion. Yeah, well, I think it'll be really great for the enterprise, or something. Yeah, great.
I hear you.
So I ended up ghostwriting for some consulting firms, and just kind of it was not about me anymore. And I just kind of, and it was a really great period, but I also missed a chunk of IT history because I was too busy kind of helping other people do stuff to pay attention. And I came back. So when I left, there was this kind of young thing called DevOps. When I arrived back, it was just like kind of, we need to think about governance. We need to think about. So I arrived with a fantastic sense of imposter syndrome because everyone seemed to know what they were talking about. And I also felt there was this big chunk missing of, and as you say, the kind of ruggedization was just starting to happen. And I kind of just shimmied along and aligned with that because I thought, that's what I get. That's what I understand, kind of the old school meets the new. And so I put out 6 months ago a report about value stream management, which is essentially we need financial controls and we need to know where, visibility on what we're delivering here, side of governance. DevSecOps is we need to think about risk, we need to think about complaint. It's just that side of governance, but they're all part of the same. You could draw a helix or something. They're all part of the same picture. And I think there's other elements. So my next report's going to be around quality management, performance management. And then
very interesting.
You think about APM, or you think about where Kubernetes is going. And it's all about, ultimately, I keep going back to the Sorcerer's Apprentice. And it's so easy to make a broom. It's so easy to make 1,000 brooms, but who's going to manage the brooms? So you've got two choices. Either you put in place broom management systems, or you start saying, let's slow down on the brooms. Carry on making the brooms, but let's at least think about them before you. And so the DevSecOps report is very much under that umbrella. It's like, it's not about how can we inject security into the development process, or it's more about risk exists at every stage. How do you understand that risk at every stage? How do you kind of give yourself visibility on what might go wrong? And then how do you mitigate that risk? Because as you know, it's the old curve of the later you leave something, the more expensive it is to fix. So that whole old school probability times impact equals risk, and just how do we mitigate either the probability or the impact? That's what it means to me, applied to the development process.
Sure. So, I probably come at it from a different angle than you. I come at it from a very practical practitioner's angle and a people angle, John. To me, no matter how many processes we put in place, fundamentally, there are just not enough people to do it right, it seems. The developer world, and you come from the developer world where I come from the security world. The developer, there's, 42 million developers in the world, growing by 20% a year or some crazy number like that, right? It's the fastest growing nation in the world if we're a nation. Where security is growing, but there's never enough security people. There's never enough, especially when we say, look, we need to, with something like DevOps, we need security folks integrated into that DevOps team, into these DevOps culture processes and so forth. And so you got two choices. You could breed more security people, which is a bit of a longer term kind of thing, because setting up security breeding farms takes years. But or you could put in better processes, you could put in better controls, or you can convert some of these developer folks and DevOps folks to make them more security conscious, more risk aware, more governance aware. And, it's probably a combination of all those three, I think. But interested in your take on it.
No, so was that your really polite way of saying I completely disagree with you? But
no, not at all.
My habit is to start talking in far too waffly philosophical terms and then get down to the weeds. I was very lucky to work for several years at GCHQ as one of their. So while it was about development, it was about, I was helping with, as I said, with the operations side of things. We were helping in the NOC. And deploying stuff. Security was kind of all around you. So this idea of getting the security folks to speak to the developers, again, it was a bit like my first experience with the Tom DeMarco PeopleWare book. Sorry, Timothy Lister, both of them. Whereas then I went out into the rest of the world and found it was really different. So I'd worked in a place where the dev teams, the security teams, and the ops teams were working together already. Dev and ops, not so much, but everyone was doing security. And then I went out of there, and it was like, oh, they think that security is optional. No, that's kind of weird. And I guess my struggle in a lot of this is how to very, very quick story, an analogy story. So when I was working at Alcatel, and I was in charge of all the Sun workstations. And the previous place for developers, and the previous place I worked, everyone had one on their desk. Where I was, they had them in a machine room. And I was like, nobody has workstations in a machine. You don't go into the room let's just put them on everyone's desks. And so I said, hey, next week we'll have shifted all these computers onto your desks, and then you can just work whenever you can just be working on the computer and you don't have to shift. And everyone hated the idea because they thought that, my desk, I don't want a computer on my desk. I've got all the other stuff on it. It was just suddenly imposing a change, even though it was the most obvious change in the world. People were really against it. And I found that with security, it's not so much whether or not it's security, it's about the fact that it's something that people didn't have to do before. And I don't think that it's like when someone joins the police force. When people go into a security world and they start thinking risk first, then they learn it and they get it, and it starts sitting in the brain, and it becomes second nature. If you haven't done that, it can't just be second nature. So the whole DevSecOps thing to me is very much about that change management aspect. So it's not imposing on developers, but it's also not saying developers are never going to get this. It's far more about going, well, you lock your door, let's lock the door of the software.
So when I first started with this DevSecOps thing, there were really two distinct. There was the tribe of DevOps folks and the security community. And what was interesting is I had a foot in each, and I would speak to them separately, never together. And when you spoke to the security folks, I mean, they were adamant that no one gave a crap about security but them. And that was the problem. They were the only people in the world who cared about security. Those developers, they only care about getting code done on time. They have to get it done on time. They don't give a rat's you know what about security. The ops folks, they just throw that over the wall to the security team. They ask us to come in only when it hits the fan, right? But not when we could do something. And that was a very prevailing attitude of security people. Now, you speak to dev folks and even some of the ops folks. Granted, you might have been in an anomaly utopia there, but a lot of dev folks were like, these security people are just a pain in the ass. I mean, they tell us no, but they don't tell us why. So I'm not understanding. If I can't understand why something is wrong, illegal, not best security practices, against government, if I don't understand it, I can't integrate that into what I do going forward. Now, mind you, I never met a developer or any professional who raised their hands and said, I want to put out insecure product, or I want to develop crappy code, or I want to stand up an app that is riddled with cross-site scripting errors or some other thing, right? Everyone has pride in what they do. No one wants to put out crap. But it was just this, like, two ships passing in the night sort of mentality where, I met the enemy and the enemy is us a little bit. And
absolutely. And I think that we all get so pulled into that. I think the best phrase I'd ever heard, and you could apply this to any group about any other group. I think it was an ops guy, but it could have been a security guy who said, "Those people out there have no idea what it's like in here."
Us versus them. It's immediate, yeah.
But the developers could say it as well. They got 1,000 conflicting requirements. All the priorities are changing all the time. They're going to look stupid. They don't know how the code works. It's the first time they've been using that language, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's just this irony that we kind of assume that everyone else is doing great and we're the rubbish ones, and so we're all muddling along through the rest of it. But it was one of the reasons in the report I chose. So I ended up going. I've got to put this polite. This is going out live. So I ended up vanishing into a dark hole as I was writing the report, because there are loads of people building security products for security people.
You're not kidding.
A lot of that, like 150, we've got a catalog of 150 various different types of security products. And if you add a CI/CD interface onto any of those things, you can start calling yourself a DevSecOps vendor. And I ended up with a list of like 35, 40 companies that were all saying, and I thought, this is DevSecOps. And then I suddenly realized, and I was talking to colleagues, and I suddenly realized that just because you've got an interface onto DevOps, CI/CD, whatever, that doesn't make you, that means you're helping. Sure, great, brilliant. You're doing a great job. Thank you so much. So I ended up not defining, but accepting the fact that DevSecOps, from a solutions perspective, if you want help, it was that, to your point, it was that process. It was the developer that would really, really like to deliver something that was lower risk today. How can we achieve that for them? So it's process support, it's secrets management, it's drift, it's visibility, it's all of those things that you need so that you can go home at night and go, yeah, I think I got away with it, and the tools help me to do that.
So I tell people it's about defining security tools for developers, not I read it in a blog post you had sent over. So my friend Rich Mogul, Securosis, he was at Gartner before that. When cloud security first became a thing in like 2005, 2006, he used to call it cloud washing. Right? You want cloud security? We would take just, we take the security, move it up to a cloud server, and voila, it's now cloud security, right? And he called it cloud washing, that it was bullshit. I saw you, excuse my language, I saw you used a similar term, DevSecOps washing or something like that, right? Where you're taking your security tool, and as you said, you're throwing a CI/CD relevant interface onto it, and now it's DevSecOps, right? We shifted it left. But that's not the essence of it, right? It's not the essence. It's an impersonation, but not the essence.
One of the things that we work in tech, we love shiny things, and I'm probably as guilty. I'm not going to claim that I've got some kind of capability of ignoring shiny things that no one else has, but I've seen it again and again. I've probably done it again and again, where I've thought that anything that someone offers me, if it says all the right things, is going to somehow turn me into a master pianist or a brilliant artist or a fantastic athlete. Something that get the sports watch and suddenly you can run marathons. And I think that the whole idea of washing with any acronym also applies to the people that are buying the stuff. So you can't just pick up a tool that's got DevSecOps in the tagline and go, we're doing DevSecOps now. It's actually back to my waffly philosophical introduction. It does come down to, are you collaborating on policy? Have you got management visibility onto risk? Is everyone bought in, back to the developer side of things, bought into the fact that their job might not be on a line, but they could be getting on with more fun stuff because they're not having to fix the boring stuff if they do it right first time. So it's very much about tools can help, people can help, but everyone can do the washing. And it's about actually embracing what the problems that you need to solve rather than just buying something and getting on with your life.
Agreed. Excellent stuff. Tom, we're running low on time. You know what? We didn't even mention, for people who want to grab the copy of the report, stay up to date on what GigaOm's doing, what you're doing at GigaOm, where do they get information? Obviously, gigaom.com.
Well, gigaom.com. One thing we love at GigaOm is interaction with enterprise and user companies. And I'm JONNO on Twitter. Genuinely, if anyone's got any feedback, concerns, questions, just ping me, and we can take it from there.
Sounds great. So the next report's on quality assurance.
Next report's going to be on two in parallel. I've got low code. I'm happening. Is happening. I'm doing it, and performance testing. So they'll keep you busy. Well, low code sends us off in another completely different direction.
Yeah, no. So just a cheap plug. We actually are doing a virtual event. I want to say it's the week of November 16th on low code, no code. It's called Low Code Today. And we'll talk when we hang up here. That might be something you're interested in. We've got some interesting folks. I'll talk to you about that. And then, performance testing is something we cover a lot. We'll talk more. But, John, good work. Thank you for coming on and being here on TechStrong TV with us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All righty. Hey, this is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV with John Collins of GigaOm. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
I interview dozens of people every month here on TechStrong TV, and I have been doing interviews, whether it's for the written articles, videos, audio, podcasts, whatever, for years and years. One of my favorite people to interview, though, is my friend Mike Rothman. Mike, longtime founder of Securosis, founder of Disrupt Ops, always has an opinion, usually really well-reasoned and smart. But he's also a lot of fun. If you've ever had the pleasure of meeting Mike Rothman, you know that. And the longer I know Mike, the more fun we have catching up. In today's episode, Mike and I talk about the mythical security champion. Are they born or are they made? We talk about the state of DevSecOps, what's working, what's not working, from Mike's vantage point. It's just an all-around great conversation, as usual. So here now is my interview with Mike Rothman of Securosis and Disrupt Ops.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another segment here for TechStrong TV. We have back my friend Mike Rothman of Disrupt Ops and Securosis, Security Insight, joining us. Mike's been on before, but he disappears on me. He'll come on 2 times in a month, and then you got to track him down 2 months later. It's that lifestyle he leads of Robin Leach.
I'd say, jet setting, but nobody's jet setting anywhere nowadays. So.
If you're lucky, you got an electric vehicle.
Right.
Otherwise, it's internal combustion. But anyway, Mike, it's a pleasure to have you back on. How's everything?
Everything's, again, as I say, this is, kind of, and I don't want to overuse this, but, there's not a lot of precedent for what we're dealing with now. I think it's accelerating a lot of the things that we've been talking about for many years, both on the development side and the security side. And I'm just, again, feel very fortunate and grateful to be in a business that's, continues to be very important now. So, so again, it's just impacted everybody and you feel terrible about that. But on the other hand, I'm just grateful that, I'm in a situation where I can continue to, be productive and work with great clients and keep moving things forward.
Yeah. And, more than just grateful, and I don't want to overblow it like that we're champions of the world or something, but you know what? There's a responsibility that comes with this gratefulness, which is the reason why you're busy and the reason why we're doing this is because the mission, the job, the goal here is to keep all these people who are living online now more than in the physical world in some instances, to keep them safe and secure and keep the wheels turning and literally keep the lights on and the internet up, because it's truly critical infrastructure. Never had a more critical time. And so it's important. It's important work. And that, sometimes we lose sight of that because we're all in our own, oh my God, I'm glad I got a job. I'm glad I'm making money. I'm glad I could put food on the table. But there's a reason. There's a reason for it. So yeah, I hear you. Of course, Mike, there's the other aspect of it though, which is kind of the Groundhog Day thing, right? Every day is the same as the day before. I've interviewed you 6 times since COVID.
That's right.
Same
My background's the same. Yeah,
the background's the same. And again, I'm not like crying here, with the smallest violins in the world. But for people like you and I, Mike, it's October. We would be 200,000 miles in on our travel this year, right? Think about how many trips, how many places, how many times did you not go to San Francisco this year?
No, and that's exactly right. And all, the other places, obviously I go to Kansas City a lot to see the Disrupt Ops folks, and there's none of that. Right. Yeah. So it's all from this same, kind of perch in my basement where I can't, really dramatically impact my family, adversely.
Right.
So, they kind of sequester me, down here so I can't hurt anything. But again, all things considered, it's not a terrible existence, right? I mean,
No.
we figured out how to make it work. There are other folks, obviously first responders, obviously, people who don't have an option to sit in their basement and continue to be productive. And you got to feel for those folks, right? Because they, kind of take their life in their hands every time they go out. And that's tough. And that's really the situation that we're in. But back to your point, what it's doing is it's really accelerating a lot of the, kind of transformational initiatives that have been underway for a while. It's accelerating them. It's getting folks to really think about what does work look like when we, kind of emerge from this thing. Am I going to continue to do 150,000 air miles a year when this thing is done, when I can teach from my basement? I don't know. Right. I mean, there's something about being together with people, and I don't want to totally eliminate that, but do I need to do, kind of 3 weeks out of the month, kind of out there, working with folks? Maybe not. Right. And for a lot of collaborative, kind of business environments, right. Do folks need to be in one place? And you think from a security standpoint, the difficulty in finding resources that happen to be in your geography, right? Are we restricted to that anymore? Or can we just find the best person and have a work situation where they can collaborate and they can contribute regardless of where their location is? So are we breaking down a lot of these, kind of boundaries, just due to the nature that, it really isn't an option or prudent for all of us to get together? So we figured these things out. Now, when we are able to get back together sometime in the future, just because we can doesn't mean we should.
Or will.
Yeah.
I don't disagree. I mean, here's the good news. If you're a security professional, whether you live in Kansas City, Missouri, or Minnesota, or Georgia, or Nebraska for that matter, you could still work for that Silicon Valley company now. You don't have to pay $4,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco. And I think that will be, something good that comes out of all of this. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to have to fly into San Francisco once a month, once every 2 months, 3 months, to meet with the team, because you're right. There's just something about being in the same room that you can't, this Zoom just doesn't do it. But let's talk DevSecOps a little bit, right? So certainly, this rising tide of cloud and digital transformation has lifted security, and it's specifically around DevSecOps, around cloud security. We've seen, I think, tremendous progress being made in the last 8-9 months. What do you see? What do you think?
We do. And actually, I thought that was kind of an interesting precursor to the discussions, because we were starting to talk about breaking down boundaries and collaborating more effectively, and, really not worrying about being, kind of distance centric or geographically kind of restricted to, who we can work with and what we can do. Because, it's interesting. Everybody wants to talk about DevSecOps, right? But you still have DevOps and you have security. Right. And as much as we want to talk and aspirationally, we want to, think that we're all working together, the reality is you still have just, I don't want to say friction, because it's not necessarily friction between the two teams, but there's definitely a misunderstanding of who does what. There's an accountability, there's a responsibility, there's an empowerment gap in terms of who does what, right? And the developers are going to do things, and there are a bunch of tools that are showing up to give the developers better control and better understanding about the security posture of what it is that they're building. But there's still a huge gap in terms of ops, right? What security things are the ops people responsible for? What security things are the security people responsible for? How do we get, common tooling in between them so that they can collaborate more effectively? And ultimately, it gets back to information. Right? If the ops people don't have the information they need to make the changes to impact the security posture when they need to make them, all hell breaks loose, right? I mean, people are doing the, who's on first thing because they don't know who's responsible, to do what. And we're still seeing, again, we think things are improving on the DevSec piece of things, but the SecOps piece of things, there still seems to be huge communication gaps in terms of how that works. And that kind of brings up, this concept of the security champion that we like to talk about, right? DevOps, who love, who's my security champion? And security people are like, let's find the champion, right? How do you find that champion, right? How do you educate them? How do you incent them to actually, kind of care about security and do the right stuff, right? So these are the things and I don't have great answers yet, right? What I like to do is surface conversations that I think we need to have, right? I think we need to have these conversations as an industry because we're still struggling. As much as we can put DevSecOps on a paper and have a bunch of companies say DevSecOps, 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 right? At the end of the day, when you're down talking to the people in the field, there's still just a lot of misconceptions and a lot of confusion about, what this really means and how to build those bridges.
Yeah. So first of all, I agree with you 100%. I think a big problem is, Mike, is that people, non-security people, DevOps, Ops, QA, business people, they think of security as sort of monolithic. It's security. All security is security. But it's not. And we in security know that. So when we think of, as you called it, DevSec, when we think of security in the realm of the developer, and so to me, that's that shift left thing where we're talking pre-deployment security. So we're looking at pre-deployment code and configuration, right? Pre-deployment. I think we've made amazing progress there. I think there are companies like Sneak, for instance, who are making sort of security tools for dev, and we've sold devs, or we've aligned with devs that security equals quality, and they want to up the quality of their code. And we're doing security writing Git, like GitOps and GitSec, and these kinds of things. Fantastic. But that's only one segment of the security puzzle. There's at the time of deployment security, there's post-deployment security, there's that ongoing security, and that falls into the realm of ops and SRE, right? And when we talk about security champions, maybe it's the SREs we need to enlist, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a real good point. And so you get back to empowerment and funding, right? Who is responsible for this stuff? Is it the security folks that are going to end up with the budget? Is it the SRE or the traditional ops folks that are going to end up, with the budget and the responsibility? Because what you see a lot from the ops people is that security's problem. Right. And ultimately it is because, security is accountable for these things.
Well, it's security's responsibility.
Oh, no, they're accountable. Whose head rolls down the
because they're
the
responsible. Security is ultimately responsible, but they're not in the trenches there with the ops folks. That's the issue.
We're getting tied up on vernacular now. To me, accountability is whose head is rolling down the aisle when the bad thing happens.
Okay, right? So accountability is responsibility. Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
I get it. I don't disagree with you. Here's the other problem, though. One of the reasons we made progress on the sec dev piece of it is we were able to talk dev talk. The security folks were able to talk dev talk to dev. We convinced them that security is just another name for quality. And it's not that we say no to everything, but there are governance, there are compliance, there are policies. There are reasons why these aren't arbitrary and capricious things that we ask you to do. We've done a crappy job of that with the ops teams.
It's all about meeting folks where they are, right? Sneak and a bunch of these other tools, are built into the environments that the devs are using. So they don't have to go and do something different. They don't have to change their motion. They don't have to. Ops people, it's just like the security folks are like, hey, I got this, kind of Nessus scan or Qualys alert or my SIM or my security analytics thing fired off and something is broken. And the ops people go, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? Right. So they don't have.
Well, why am I doing it even? What
no
exactly
context.
is it that is right?
That's right.
There
No
is
context. So again, part of it gets back to this just communication gap, right? So one of the things we're doing at Disrupt Ops that's really, kind of been pretty interesting to customers. We actually send the alerts to the ops people, right? Depending on who, whoever's responsible for these things in their tools, right? So Slack or Microsoft Teams, right? And that's a lot of these ops folks or SRE folks. That's how they run their business, right? They get all of their stuff in Slack or Microsoft.
No, that's the communication tools today. You're not.
That's right.
No
Jira,
one's sitting
right?
in
So
the
it shows up as a ticket in Jira.
Lights blinking. Yeah.
Not anymore. Right. So, meeting them where they are, getting them the information they need starts to break down some of this resistance that they have to, making the changes. So is it the SRE team that's empowered to make these fixes? Maybe, but if you give them the information and a pretty easy set of choices, quarantine this, shut this down, right? Change this IAM policy. You do a clickety click and it's done. That's easy for them to do, right? It doesn't have to be automated. We'll get there in terms of automation and the ability to, kind of do these things automatically. But right now, humans want to feel like they understand what's going on in these things. So giving them the contextual information in the tools that they work in is absolutely critical to start to break down these barriers.
Yeah. No, I learned my security automation lessons when I tried to sell IPS instead of IDS. I realized people don't that automation don't fly so quick. But you're right. It's in tools like Slack. You look at a platform like a PagerDuty. I don't know if you're familiar with PagerDuty, for instance.
You bet.
This is what the ops folks are using. It's an alerting system, and the incident response, and it's all of those things, but it's also where they live. When an exception gets thrown, it shows up. And that may kick off a Slack message,
right?
And everything else.
It gets to the right person at the time they need it. Right? Yeah. It's not a report that shows up, a week later. Right, it's not a non-contextual alert that they get on their beeper. I remember beepers, in whatever on their phone.
No, I don't remember beepers. You're old, dude.
Exactly.
But you're right. And I mean, look, we're having a discussion. You're an analyst. We're allowed to talk vendors. You look at companies like PagerDuty, what they're doing. I saw we did a recent interview with the folks at Datadog. I'm familiar with Datadog.
Of course, yeah.
Yep. They just did an integration with the Splunk SignalFX tool where, a two-way communication. Right? Where, hey, when what Datadog is seeing throws off security exceptions or whatever, it makes it into the Splunk, and vice versa, going the other way. I love to see that melding of ops tools, SRE tools, whatever you want to call them, with the security tools. Let me throw another thing out at you, though, that I think has hindered a better security experience, especially in ops. Kubernetes is huge, right? 75% of all new applications on Amazon are kube-based now, they say. That's greenfield apps, not brownfield. But, and we've seen the rise of cloud-native kube security tools that are a throwback to like what Rich used to call cloud washing, right? Poof, you're now a kube security tool. Right, you're the same old security tool. I'm still doing a goddamn Qualys scan of the container, right? But now it's like the container scan.
It says I'm cloud ready by putting the software on an AMI and saying it runs in Amazon. I'm cloud ready. Yeah, no, you're not. You're a box in the cloud.
But we know people who sold their businesses with that, and I'm still sitting here interviewing you. But that as it may. But, again, in a lot of ways, I think that almost hurts more than it helps. right?
Well, it's all about expectations, Alan. It's all about expectations, and security has done an awful job over many decades of helping both internal constituencies and along the entire IT value chain understand why they should care about security, how they should care about security, and how they should contribute to this. So when you set the expectation that no matter what you do, it's wrong and it's going to be insecure, right? And you need to do it my way because we're the only way that makes sense. Again, I'm very big on this. We have to meet kind of DevOps where they are, because they are not coming to meet us halfway. There is no halfway. Right? We have to be there in their tools in a very friction-free environment. If you make them do other stuff, they're not going to do it. So how do we really break down those boundaries? And ultimately, how do we add value? Which is, if you're able to do, and it's not everything, but if you're able to automate certain things that when they go wrong, that violates a policy or kind of triggers a guardrail, fix it. Right. It's not. And again, yes, the ops people need to be in the loop. Maybe they want to click a button to say fix it. But at some point, they're just like, you know what? I don't want to deal with that. I know I should never have that condition in my environment. Just fix it for me. Right. And we don't do that. Right. We just send our reports out. We bitch when the assessors come in, and we wonder why the DevOps people have been going around us for 15 years. Right. We forgot. We were joking.
And the
in
developers
pre-call, right?
and ops people before the 15 years.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. But we were joking about how, the problem is the Phoenix project was 7-8 years ago at this point. Maybe you live. Yeah, longer. We've forgotten. Right. We've forgotten the parable about how the security person comes in and tries to run roughshod and they get ignored and marginalized. And it isn't until you work collaboratively with these folks that we remember we're all a team and we have to help each other achieve our goals. And again, we want to talk about DevSecOps, at least the SecOps piece of it. There's still huge communication problems that are really hindering our ability to be truly successful in this.
Well, I think it was also the security guy was an alcoholic, and it wasn't until he got himself cleaned up a little bit that they took him seriously.
Yeah.
But hey, who's
Well, listen, if your job was security, you'd be on the sauce. If you had an ops job, you'd be on the sauce.
But whatever. Someone, what do you think? I could talk to you sober like this? No. But let's return to this concept of security champion, right? So this is my grandma used to call them Bubba Mices, right? That we've sold is that we need to find that security champion in the dev side, in the ops side, not on the security team. We need someone else in IT to be the security champion. And inherently, when we say that, what we're saying is that the security people can't be the security champion because they don't, for whatever reason, we're not the security champion. We need one of them to be the security champion.
We need somebody to think about it, right? And I'm not saying that they have to be accountable or even, responsible in a lot of cases, but they can't get in the way. Right. And that's kind of to me, establishing and finding these champions are really about having them systematically do the right thing from a security posture standpoint and tell their friends that they're doing the right thing and why it's a good thing. And so again, it's about education. I call it guidance, right? It's about giving these folks the guidance that they need to understand what they should be doing. I don't run into a lot of ops people. I don't run into a lot of dev people who say security, right? I have no interest in that. It's not important to me. I don't care. Screw them. Right. I hear I don't know what that means. Or I hear all I get from those guys is these crappy reports that tell me I'm doing everything wrong, but no understanding about how to address it, no understanding about how to fix it. I still hear a lot of that. I don't hear a lot of, well, God, they sat with me for a couple hours and helped me understand what this is. They gave me tooling that worked in my existing workflow so that I didn't have to take unnatural actions in order to, do the right thing. We're not making it easy for those folks. And I think that's where the gap is right now.
Absolutely. So to me, when I think security champions, Mike, I think of the word advocate, right? Doesn't mean that they are emotionally invested or
Incented,
financially incented, right? But they're advocates that they understand, look, the security people are not wild-eyed drunks screaming, right? Because they're on, whatever. There's a reason why we got to do this. They're trying to make it easier for us to stay within those guardrails, to stay on the road, in the lane. And we need to help them. The other fact point that I got to tell you, I talk to a lot of people, obviously, doing this and what we do. Surprisingly, considering I never leave this office, is there's an awful lot of developer folks who were developers early in their career who transitioned to security, right? So they get, and I think those are some of your most effective security advocates today, are people who've walked a mile in the shoes of the ops guy, right? Who've walked a mile in the developer shoes and can talk their talk and understand their pain, but can also understand the security guy. We got away from that, Mike. When you and I first got into security, there weren't schools that offered a major in cybersecurity.
That's right.
Right? Most security guys were the idiot who, the CIO, picked out of the network team to go do security. You're going to be the firewall guy now, and you're going to do the IDS or the vulnerability. Well, yeah, that was it. So we had that. We were ops people at the core. It was easier for us, I think, at that point. Maybe we didn't realize it, to be a security champion because we were an ops person for the most part. Today, you don't have that. You clearly have, I feel like it's Brave New World. We have alphas and betas and gamma, right? We have people who were bred security people. They've never lived that ops life. I don't know if a lot of times if they understand the concept of empathy with the ops folks, if they don't empathize.
I mean, it's also different in that back in those days, we were within one organization. So it was kind of like in the family, right? We could fight with those guys, but it was in the family. Nobody had to know about that out there. Now, technology is everywhere. And DevOps is by definition distributed out to a lot of, business environments, a lot of, kind of skunkworks, innovation teams. And security is just trying to get their arms around what the hell is going on, right? Yeah. So by nature, it's really hard to understand, which is why a lot of this stuff I have been talking about since 2007, right? Kind of this idea that the job of security is one of persuasion as opposed to, draconian rules and constructs. It's a matter of having to get out of your office and work with the teams. Yes, harder now because we're in a situation where, we don't necessarily have the teams collaborating and working together, but all the same, this idea, and again, I keep getting back to this term guidance, right? The security folks have to provide guidance to both the dev side of the house and the ops side of the house, wherever it may be within the organization, to help them understand, one, what are the rules of the road, right? What can you do and what can't you do? And here's a set of tools that will help you do stuff better, faster, easier, and ultimately more securely. And those folks that get it become the champions, right? But you can't just go and say, pretty please, like me, I saved your suburbs. Oh, did I say that out loud? I shouldn't say that stuff out loud. But you go to them with value and saying, I can help you do your job better, more effectively. And that's why you should, kind of listen. And that's why you should do, a bunch of these things. And to me, that's how you make champions, right? That's how you make advocates, not by begging or cajoling or guilting or coming with your report saying the auditor's really pissed, right? They don't give a crap about that at the end of the day.
You lost me at Save My Suburbs. I'm sorry. You just took me on a whole different track, and you know me. It doesn't take much to trigger me. Don't get me started. But you're 100% right. You're 100% right. So, Mike, we got to tie a bow on this because we've been rambling here for a half hour. They'll just think we're two old Jewish crazy men. But so how is DisruptOps helping with this?
So it's really about that communication piece of it, right? So what we found, we call it intelligent alerting, but it's basically this idea that we have a set of triggers, and they can come from your existing, alerting capabilities. You can plug into Security Hub if you're in AWS, any of your vulnerability management things. We get a trigger, and basically what we do is we deliver that information to the team that is empowered to deal with it in their tool, whether it's Slack, whether it's Microsoft Teams, whether it's, again, a Jira ticket, what have you. Give those folks the information they need. And when they're ready, they can actually remediate right within the tool. So right within the Slack message is a button to say, fix it, and you can fix it. Again, you don't have to, right? You can alert, you can snooze it, right? Or suppress it over time. So you've got a lot of options on that front. But the first step is always communication. And then there are sets of use cases that go beyond that in terms of actually enforcing some of these policies just automatically, right? Basically as a matter of practice, so that somebody doesn't even have to be involved in it. But it really is kind of a crawl, walk, run type of thing. And crawling is really just getting contextual information to the teams that need it when they need it in the tool that they use. And we've got a lot of interest on the part of folks, which again, really to break down a lot of these boundaries and barriers that have made it difficult for security to be effective in a lot of these high velocity, DevOps types of environments.
Excellent, man. Mike, thanks so much for taking the time out and coming. Don't stay away 2 months again now, okay? We'll have you on here soon.
I have a thing on my to-do list, set up time with Shimmy, and I suppress that sometimes. So, I need to get
look, I know you have a very busy travel schedule. It's okay, but we'll have you on here soon. Maybe you're online. Maybe you're waiting online to vote. That's what I thought. I hear in Georgia their lines are like days. But anyway, man, it's a pleasure seeing you. You look great. Stay well and healthy. Good luck. Mike Rothman, Disrupt Ops, Securosis, here on TechStrong TV. Thanks, man. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be back in a moment with another guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
So as you probably know, Progress Software acquired Chef, I guess it was about 3 months ago now. And of course, people have been wondering, what does it mean for the Chef line, open source tools and everything else? Well, the word from Progress is not to worry. They're in good hands. The very first Chef update since the Progress acquisition is about to come out. And I caught up with Mark Traster, who's VP of Strategy at Progress, to talk about this first release, what's happening with Chef and the Chef product line, how's it fitting into Progress, and what can we expect to see going forward from this exciting new entity in our DevOps space. So here's Mark Traster of Progress Software.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another segment for TechStrong TV. I'm really happy to have as our guest for this segment Mark Traster. Mark is VP of Strategy at Progress Software. Mark, I hope I got the name right.
Yes,
but if I didn't, correct me.
No, you got it right, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you on. So Mark, I think this is the first time we've interviewed someone from Progress Software on TechStrong TV, maybe even on any of our MediaOps video programs. So I guess we should start with a little background on Progress Software, maybe a little of your own personal background. And I want to preface it by saying, of course, I think most of our audience may have heard the name Progress, maybe not for the first time, but they've heard the name as the company that acquired Chef, which of course is a huge, player in the DevOps market. So Mark, give us what is Progress? What are you guys about? And a little bit of your background.
Okay, well, thanks. Yeah, so Progress is all about helping organizations develop, deploy, and manage what we call mission critical or high impact applications. And that takes a lot to do that, right? It's not just the developers, it's not just the IT ops, it's DevOps, it's a lot of things that need to come together. So we really support a set of tools and platforms that support all the different persona that are actually involved in building those applications. So my role as VP of Strategy is really to help out in terms of how we go to market as an entire corporate entity. And so we have tools that help front-end developers build mobile applications or chatbots or web applications. We have back-end capabilities that are platforms that are cloud native that organizations can use to build these high fidelity applications while integrating them into back-end systems of records, databases, cloud assets, and things like that. And then we also provide kind of that last mile of connectivity so that people can connect to all those different data sources. And while we provided some DevOps capabilities for products that we hosted, we didn't have a DevOps platform, and Chef really brings that to Progress. So it's just, I couldn't be more excited about the opportunity that we have to bring these two entities together. And that's, I guess, a little bit about myself and Progress.
Very cool. Excellent, excellent. So Mark, every day is Groundhog Day for me with COVID and everything, right? I think there's a lot of us out here who kind of feel that way. So time kind of loses all meaning. But I'm going to guess Progress Board announced the acquisition. Was it July or August?
Yeah,
I don't even.
I'm terrible at remembering dates, and you're right, it does all kind of blend together. But we just completed the transaction a couple of weeks ago. So.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, things are moving very rapidly, and kind of with this blur of COVID, all things COVID, it's interesting that we were able to successfully do that in a completely virtual environment. We didn't meet any face-to-face meetings, so it's amazing that we've been able to accomplish what we have. And I think you were kind of talking before we jumped on that things are really hopping for your business and hiring people, and there's a lot of excitement. And even in the midst of COVID, for us to be able to pull this off really is a testament to both Progress and to Chef in terms of being able to kind of come together over this transaction and deal.
I agree. I've had the pleasure of talking to a couple of CEOs who did some M&A activity during all of this, and it kind of boggles my mind how you can, back in the .com days, I was VP Corp Dev Biz Dev at a company called Interliant, .com story, ASP. Yeah. We did 30 acquisitions in 36 months. So I did a lot of acquisitions.
Wow, that's crazy.
Not doing them, but not being able to be in person, to shake someone's hand in person, or
is there something
you don't know
missing?
how you do it.
Yeah, because you're right. You want to be able to look across the table at dinner and just really understand and get a sense of the people that you're going to
take the measure of the person. Yeah,
definitely.
Crazy, but hey, congratulations, and that's great. Thanks. So, we mentioned COVID. It's kind of an elephant in every room we walk into these days, right? Yeah. And how I mean, beyond getting the acquisition done, how has COVID helped, hindered, factor, non-factor in terms of getting the business going, right? How do we integrate Chef with Progress? How do we keep things moving?
Yep. Well, first, I think I'd like to comment on what it means to us as an organization, what we see in the market. And clearly, if you think about the role of digital, it was exploding, right? And you looked at the organizations that were most effective were the ones that really leveraged digital in the best possible way. And with COVID, that's just accelerated the need to do that, not only for customer engagement, but for employee engagement. And everything at the end of the day is really tied together. And, we see study after study where if your employees are not engaged, then your customer satisfaction suffers. And if you're not reaching out to your customers in the way that they want to interact with you, and in this day and age, maybe the only way they can interact with you is through digital. So we've just seen it put a premium on the products and capabilities that we deliver. And I think part and parcel to that is, if you think about DevOps and DevSecOps, the ability to actually deliver things quickly and to deliver things at speed and to make sure that they're secure is even more important. So as people move to Agile and they want to speed their development processes, if they're not able to manage the infrastructure or to deploy the applications and to make sure that everything is compliant, then they're going to fail. So we've just seen a lot more pressure put on organizations to actually invest and to do the right thing when it comes to digital.
Sure, absolutely. You know, it's funny when you talk about compliance. Someday they're going to do business school studies on what went on here the last 9 months or whatever it is, you know, and it's going to be interesting, because I think at first there was sort of what I call the hair on fire phase, right? Where, oh my God, we got to close the office. Everyone's got to be remote. But you know what? We're lucky. We help companies with their digital transformation, and we still have business. And we've got to service that business. We have to keep developing our solutions and delivering and upkeep and all of that. And so there was a big rush to just sort of keep the lights on, the wheels moving, and from a remote footing. And sometimes when that happens, compliance, security, they get kind of, we'll worry about that tomorrow. Right now, we got to keep the wheels moving. But you can't, you know, maybe that works for a week, 2 weeks. You can't sustain that kind of attitude. And I think people began to realize that. And all of a sudden, you know what? This may be around a while. We got to figure this out. I'm wondering if that's not what you see there.
No, and I think it's absolutely true. And I think the other thing too is that when it comes to security, I mean, obviously you have the CISO, the team that's actually managing security, and you have developers, and you know, not all developers are security experts, right? And not all IT ops people are security experts. And then if you're managing a large environment, you can't depend on completely manual processes to do things. And that's where, you know, Chef really comes in. And we've had, you know, Chef has had a major focus in terms of compliance. And, you know, even over very diverse workloads, where an organization, we actually have a customer now that uses our infrastructure or infra capability to scan 8.5 million different nodes that are across AWS, Azure, GCP, and Alibaba. And they bring that information back and can see it in a visual way to make sure that they're in compliance. And that really takes pressure off the IT organization. It takes pressure off the developers, and it, you know, provides trust and you know, reduction of risk to the people on the security side. So I think you're right. I think that compliance is going to be more important as we move forward. You know, you have things like GDPR, you have all of these things that organizations are trying to keep up with, especially if they're in healthcare or finance. So it's a huge burden for organizations, and they really need to get to the point where they can manage that as a coded infrastructure, basically.
Sure. Mark, I mentioned earlier that I was part of an organization where we did a lot of acquisitions over a relatively short period of time. And, you know, quite frankly, some of them failed, quite frankly. You know, the saying in Silicon Valley is, you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, right? But, you know, one way of judging how these acquisitions go is, does the acquired organization continue developing product, new releases, stuff like that? And from what I understand, you guys are announcing sort of the first post-acquisition new releases coming out of the Chef portfolio. Is that correct?
Yeah, and you know, before I comment on that, I kind of, because it's a great question, and you know, obviously, when there's change, concern comes along with that change, right?
Sure.
But with Progress, you know, we've had a long-standing commitment to the types of acquisitions that we're going to do are very like-minded in terms of our culture and our commitment to our customers. And so that was one of the things that really excited me about Chef, because I knew about the Chef community before we even started looking at an acquisition. And I felt it was a really good match for us, not only in terms of our maniacal commitment to our customers, but also we have a shared culture in terms of how we manage diversity and inclusion. So from that point of view, I think it was a really, really good marriage. And from a customer point of view, I'm sure there are questions. In fact, we've had, conversations with over 50 different customers to kind of describe what we're doing. And after every one of those conversations, when we, made sure that they understood our commitment to open source was unwavering, that was going to completely be the way we go forward, the way we're going to provide support to them, and the way we're going to continue to manage things in a fair basis in terms of licensing. Every one of those conversations has ended on a very, very positive note. So we're, couldn't be more happy about where we are with Chef. And to your point about kind of ongoing innovation, we really think that we can now really double down on that innovation pipeline. And you referenced a new release that's going to come out, which really piggybacks on some other capabilities that we released last year. And that was to move to a more, workload aligned approach, so that organizations can more easily consume our capabilities and to manage it more effectively. So those workload aligned approaches are around application management, infrastructure management, as well as compliance. So those are additional things that we're delivering or augmenting and strengthening with this latest release. And along with that is a whole set of new capabilities. So we focused a lot on making sure that we could speed the performance aspects. So things as low level as lazy loading, or really working on making sure that we can deploy to production even faster. And I already mentioned the organization that does the cloud scanning, but that technology, again, is really coupled with our ability to provide a library, a cloud-based library of CIS certified premium content that we have an SLA to deliver on in terms of whether those things are changed. We provide updates. So that, in addition to some things like a skills validation program where organizations, either our customers or partners, can make sure their people are certified and can, quite frankly, advertise the fact that they are certified through open badges, through an open badges standard. So, I mean, we're really excited about what we've been able to deliver, and the fact that release has not been delayed, and then much more, exciting things to come as we move forward.
Fantastic. What is the timeline on the release? Do you know?
End of October.
Oh, so like this week.
Yes.
Actually, truth be told, we are recording this. Today's the 27th or 28th. I forget. I think it's the 27th, but people probably won't see it till the 29th, which is Thursday. So it'll be right around then.
That's probably good, because our press release doesn't drop until the 28th. So you're getting a sneak peek before other people know about it.
Well, unless you had a DeLorean with 6.7 kilowatts and you could go back in time, right? Or back to the future. But yes, you're right. Yeah. One of the wonderful things of pre-recording versus live. Yeah. But so Mark, so that's exciting, right? Got a new release, new capabilities, and really showing, no hiccups with the acquisition as you continue along your release cycles. I'm going to ask you though, you're VP of strategy, and I was a chief strategy officer at one of my last companies that I founded. Let's put on our strategy sort of goggles and look ahead. Q1, Q2 next year, even maybe into next summer. It may be that long until we start seeing whatever this new normal is going to be. Where do you see Chef, Progress, the market a little further out, 2-3 quarters out?
Yep. Yeah, so a lot of people have asked us, and I'll come back and answer the entire question, but for some reason I want to start here. People have asked us what we're going to do in terms of integration, because there are natural synergies in terms of some of the products that we have. And so, for example, on the Progress side, we have an automated test capability. We are actually the corporate supporters for Fiddler, which is the most popular web proxy tool. So kind of relating to debugging capabilities as well as that. And if you think about DevOps in a very holistic fashion, you can't just solve one area of the of the challenge, right? Because it's going to take you whatever the longest link in the chain is. That's what's going to be your gating factor. So we really believe that being able to speed and ease the life of all of these participants is really important. So, but that being said, the most important thing is that we do what's right for the customer. And so we're going to drive our level of integration based on what our customer demand is versus just to integrate versus integration. But we do think that there's some synergies there. And in terms of, where we're going to be in 2 quarters, I mean, sometimes I think technology progresses so fast, but then sometimes I take a step back and it's just like, well, it's really just the same thing in a different format. So with that bias being said, I think we'll continue to see people from a experience point of view investing in terms of being able to do true omni-channel experiences, right? So people are talking about it. People have talked about personalization and one-to-one marketing since, I don't know, Seth Godin and whatever, before 2000, and some of that has happened, but I think there's a lot more that can happen. But organizations, that are thinking about how do they allow their users to seamlessly interact with them across web, desktop, an Alexa skill device, AR, VR. We have a customer that's about to go live with a VR product that they actually are doing their plant training in terms of safety and security, all via VR. And so just some kind of cool things that are happening. And then I think on more on the back end, it's more of people being able to realize the benefits of cloud native. So a lot of people are talking about like serverless technologies and microservices, and certainly some organizations have reaped the benefit of that, but I think a lot more organizations can, and that's where Progress helps people to attain that in a more easy fashion. And Chef comes into play too in terms of being able to deploy to those different workloads, to write once, code once, and deploy to virtually everywhere. So anyway, that's a little bit about what I think is coming down the road.
I can't say I disagree with a lot of it. Mark, we're probably over time or coming up on the end of our time here. Where can people, I mean, is everything encapsulated now at the Progress website, or does Chef still have Chef, or
that's a really good question. So no, not everything.
Like, where do we send people?
Yeah. Well, they should continue to go to where they do today, so chef.io. So we are, to your point, building out what we need to do to tell the Chef story more holistically on the Progress website. We do things in a phased manner over time. So we obviously have the announcement there. We've integrated Chef into what we call our marketecture. So if you were to go to progress.com and click on learn more about what we do, you're going to see a marketecture that articulates those things that I talked about, the adaptive experience layer, the cognitive cloud layer, the connected data layer, and then what we call continuous operations, which is where Chef fits in. But that will show how the overall portfolio fits together. But for Chef people that need to know more about the product and want help, chef.io is definitely the place to go. And we're going to be really respective of Chef in terms of the brand, because it's an awesome brand. And the way we look at that, I know you didn't ask, but I'll go ahead and talk about it a little bit, because I'm really excited about how, Progress as this trusted entity that supports, a lot of different capabilities. Chef just adds to that. It really just, basically bolsters, our ability to tell the Progress story, which will add value to the Progress brand while we continue to maintain and invest in both Chef as a product, the community, the open source, and also as a brand.
Excellent, man. Hey, Mark, thank you for being a first-time guest here on TechStrong TV. One of the nice things about Chef is we had a long, deep relationship with them here when I first started DevOps.com 7.5 years ago, and we'd like to continue that relationship now with Progress. So we'd like to have you back on, keep us posted of what's going on, not only at Chef but in Progress as well. Our audience is pretty broad: cyber, cloud native, DevOps, and they're always interested in this. So please come back and be a regular here.
I'd love to, and yeah, it's definitely you have the right audience for us to engage with. So thanks so much. It was really great to just have a conversation with you today. I didn't feel like I was drilled for interviews, so it was great to share some time with you and the audience.
No, it was a lot of fun. I'm not going to mess your name up. Mark Traster, right?
Yes, you got
it. VP of Strategy of Progress Software, and Chef as part of Progress as well. Thanks for being our guest on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We're going to be right back with our next guest. All right, up next, we have another episode of the Cyber Hero Adventures podcast, produced and starring Gary Berman. Gary's a pip. We enjoy having him on the network. We enjoy having him as part of the family here at MediaOps, and he's doing a great job on these shows. Today's show asks the question, how do you use, stories to distill complicated cybersecurity information into digestible bites? And for anyone in the IT space, we've all had to explain to our relatives IT principles that they may look at us a little crazy on. But anyway, it's a great show with Gary. Let's go to it now.
Hello, and welcome to the Cyber Hero Adventures, Defenders of the Digital Universe show. Today's show focuses on answering the question, how do you distill complicated tech and cybersecurity information into digestible bites? Stay tuned to find out. I'm your host, Gary Berman. Our mission is to shine the light on the people and organizations who keep us safe online while at work, home, and school, and to serve as a business-to-business networking platform for the cybersecurity and IT communities. We've learned that 55% of human communications is nonverbal. That's why we include a video feed, so that you have the option of seeing our guests or simply to just listen. You never know who you're going to connect with and how you'll be able to maximize opportunities resulting from hearing from our guests. As the victim of a series of cyber attacks, I've learned that the only time that you hear about hacking or cybersecurity is when the criminals win. Well, not anymore. Let's begin by saying thank you to today's panel of unsung cyber heroes who represent the countless people who toil in anonymity to keep us safe at home, work, and school. Jen Tisdale is the principal, Cyber Physical Systems Security Programs at GRIM. She's a subject matter expert in distilling complicated cybersecurity and technology into effective internal and external communications. She has a wealth of experience in cybersecurity research, testing and consulting in automotive, heavy vehicles, ICS, robotics, aerospace, critical infrastructure, government, advanced mobility transportation, cyber business, and cyber economics. Jen is known for building trust in a trustless industry. Hi, Jen. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, my first question is, when do you sleep?
Nobody in cyber sleeps, I don't believe. We just get accustomed to it. But yeah, I mean, our particular vertical within cybersecurity is all encompassing. So it certainly grows exponentially, it seems, with every year and every new product release that's out there.
We're going to talk a lot about that soon. In the meantime, our next guest is Dave King, a founding member of the Cyber Support Alliance, creative director of Jot and Tittle Comics, and owner of the Governing Goliath Media. In these capacities, Dave serves as a trusted advisor to enterprise executives, nonprofits, and small business owners. Dave specializes in cybersecurity risk management, data breach and ransomware response, and payment card industry compliance. Hey, Dave. Welcome to the
Gary,
show.
Thanks for having me.
Let's welcome Nina Alley. For the past 5 years, Nina has served as the executive director of the Biohacking Village at DEF CON, overseeing the phenomenal growth of the Device Lab, Speaker Track, and Hands-On Lab. Prior to that, Nina spent 16 years in healthcare building breaking, security, electronic medical records, connected medical IoT devices, and working in the citizen science area on microfluids. Hi, Nina. Welcome to the show.
Gary, how are you?
We're going to learn a lot about what all of you do on today's show, but I'd like to begin by asking, why do you do it? What's your mission? Tell us your origin story, Jen.
I think the mission of the company is to make the world a more secure place and to be to provide a platform for education for not just our clients, but for the consumers that our clients are marketing to. So we do this because we really want to advocate for cybersecurity within the products that we are buying and integrating into our everyday lives. To have a smarter consumer makes for a smarter device.
And what about you personally? You know, tell us about your origin story.
Well, I think I have, I don't think anyone I know chose this path for themselves. We sort of ended up here. Certainly cybersecurity was not in my vocabulary when I was going to school. It didn't exist yet, right? The types of things that we're looking at today didn't exist. But I started down a path working in DoD on the acquisition side and a background with Department of Justice where I worked in the criminal crimes unit for computer crimes. And that slowly led me down a path of working with small businesses, trying to take their technology and innovate it so that they can commercialize it to a government customer. That somehow evolved over time into what I call cyber economics, which is not really a label that I'm aware of that exists anywhere else. But it was taking the cybersecurity technologies and rolling that into an economic development strategy. So prior to my role with Grimm, I worked for the state of Michigan under the previous administration, and I was tasked with growing the cyber economy in our state hinged on automotive and defense applications. And so slowly over time, that really grew into a niche that we now refer to as automotive security. It has a direct relation to some of our government customers that are looking at automotive security in much the same way that our industry commercial clients are looking at automotive security. And so the thought behind it is you don't really know how to make something more secure or stronger unless you know where it's weak. And that's where a company like Grimm comes in, right? That's where we get hired to find that weak vulnerability within the system and harden that system so that it can be improved and more secure, more resilient, if you will, prior to going to market, whatever market that might be.
Jen, you know, one of the things that really caught my attention as I was just listening to you is SMBs, small and medium businesses. Are they really just kind of sitting ducks as things stands right now?
Well, I mean, I think it highly depends on the type of SMB we're talking about. So if you're a small manufacturer and you're maybe a second or third level in the supply chain, you are unlikely to have a robust IT department. Your business is manufacturing, your business is production, your business is not cybersecurity per se, and you are unlikely to have a budget allocated for cyber. You'd be lucky to have a budget allocated for an IT person, quite honestly. So in that regard, the supply chain is, in my opinion, always going to be a target. And I think we're seeing a big push right now, especially if you're a defense contractor with some of the new NIST requirements that are out. NIST 800-171, to be specific, is requiring that if you're a defense contractor, you must be cyber secure, right? It's a little bit non-prescriptive, so there's room for interpretation, but I think that will become firmer over time. But a lot of these defense contractors, if you're a manufacturer, it's something that you have to get serious about and you have to do it pretty quickly. So there's a learning curve for them. And until they can figure out what they need to do to become compliant and how to maintain compliance over time, it's definitely a threat. It's definitely a threat.
So Dave, you and I met because of our shared passion for comics. Please share the origin story for Jot and Tittle. What is it?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Gary. Right, so I'm the creative director of what's called Jot and Tittle Comics. And Jot and Tittle actually has kind of started with my mentor, who was an audit partner of mine at UHY Advisors. We were going to this we're about to perform this very rigorous IT controls audit on this very large data, set of data centers. And he said, I want to leave no jot nor tittle unturned. And my colleagues and I, like, what the hell, what does that even mean? So he actually in his spare time, he does a lot of, he knows a lot of very random facts. And as it turns out, the term jot and tittle is actually an ancient biblical audit term. So a jot is a term that we still use every day. So for example, we jot things down. So what he was saying is I want you to look at the footnotes of everything that we're auditing. A tittle is actually the dot at the top of an I. So when we say, make sure that you dot all your I's and you cross all your T's. So jot and tittle started out with, this, leave no jot nor tittle unturned. And I thought it'd be a really cool idea. And it kind of started as a joke, but I tend to, go down the delusions of grandeur path with my jokes sometimes. And I said, wouldn't it be cool if I created a comic strip where the two auditors, they're cybersecurity risk management auditors, and one of them is named Jot and the other one is named Tittle. So I kind of went down that path, and it kind of led to this, neat little, little comic strip series that I use to promote, bringing highly complicated topics such as cybersecurity risk management down to much more layman's terms.
And before that, you were working at a pretty high level at PwC regarding incident management. Can you share a little bit of a real life incidents?
Sure. I mean, I have NDAs floating all over the place, but I will say that one commonality that's been on every breach incident engagement that I've been on is that a human control element was exploited before the technical control element. And then sometimes the technical controls were operating just fine, and the cyber criminals just wound up exploiting the humans. So for example, sending an email to an accounts payable department saying, pay this invoice, and the invoice goes out, or the invoice actually gets paid, the dummy invoice. So we see that happen all the time, where the technical controls are actually working just fine, especially to Jen's point in the SMB sector, the small business sector, where the technical controls are actually operating just fine. It's the human control that gets exploited. And what I like to say is that systems are actually very complex and they're very difficult to exploit. But humans, as we all know, are rather easy to exploit because trust is in our nature.
Yeah, and we work in an industry called zero trust.
Right.
Speaking of trusting someone, from the moment that we met, Nina, I knew that you were an incredibly creative and high energy person. Then you told me about your military service and your amazing journey to healthcare cybersecurity, and I just had to have you on today's show. So tell us your origin story.
So part of my origin story is that I've never had blue hair. I just listened to the greatness of all these people and I am very humbled now. So I don't know what to do with myself. The super short version of my life is that I've worked in hospitals for 16 years. Came to this rationale realization that hospitals don't really have controls, metrics, standards, laws, rules, regulations. A lot of stuff is guidance, which is cool, but also a guidance is, you don't have to, but we want you to. So that becomes an issue for me anyway when it comes to patient care, because protocols are you have to do it this way. It's not a guidance. It's not a, you don't have to give this 1 milliliter, you just kill that off, do whatever. So when it comes to healthcare, I'm kind of with David, but I'm gonna pick on both of you a little bit. Human immune systems are really hard to infiltrate for what it's worth. The human person themselves, they are that factor. They are the insider threat to what all of this is. And just listening to Jen's, I'm small compared to you. Oh my God. And you're right. ICS runs across all the things, and healthcare is one of all the things that ICS is part of, because it's that 365, 24-hour, 365, 66 on a leap year effort for patients to come in and tell their story to the doctor or to the person that they need to have that conversation with. And it's amplified by emotion, it's amplified by duress. So we were coming in here to talk about storytelling, and when this got on my calendar, I kept thinking about how do patients tell the stories of what's going on with them, and how does the physician tell the story back so that they say, I understand, more than that, this is what I think you should do to not feel this way or feel this way, whatever needs to happen.
That's incredibly insightful. And I remember the first time you told me some of the great things you're doing and just how you go about communicating and distilling complicated technology information. It's amazing. What has your role been pertaining to the biohacking village?
I'm the executive director of the Biohacking Village for the past 5 years. I am not one of the original founders, as opposed to popular thought. I am the one that took it from 9 talks to 3 different villages under one umbrella.
Wow. And what's the mission of the biohacking village?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. Something along the lines of making biotechnology tangible and not resourceful, but capable of taking care to make patients better.
One of the other things that you said to me, Nina, was that really stuck to me is that this is literally life and death. How do you relate your cybersecurity insights into storytelling and enlightening people who may not be as sophisticated?
So I'm going to tell a story about you and I, one of the conversations we had after I had done one of these with you. You were trying to come up with a name of the character that I would be if I should ever become one of the characters. And we were talking about trust, and you decided that I would be zero/trust, because in healthcare, you have to trust the person that you're having that conversation with. Even if it's that first time, you have to give them a complete data download of your life so that they can help make the best decisions for you. But simultaneously, you can't trust anything, because everything in the healthcare situation, because it's so technology heavy now, you have to completely and always be aware of, it's a zero trust environment still, right? Trust but verify constantly. So that's how I consider all of healthcare. That was the explanation that I gave you, and then you ended up calling me zero/trust.
Chen, the title of today's show is The Art of Cybersecurity Storytelling. Why don't you share the story of how your company got its name and logo? And can you tell us about the unicorn who's part of your team?
Boy, they seem to be surrounded by unicorns, and I'm sure Nina can vouch for that at all of the DEF CON villages. So Grim was founded by a gentleman by the name of Bryson Bort, and he is Grim. Some might say that it is his persona, but I think the actual story is it was his Army call sign, his handle, when he served in the military. So that name stuck, and he founded this company, named it after his handle, and Grim was born. And it was born out of the necessity to have a company built by an engineer for engineers to do really cool stuff within cybersecurity, right? I think I'm paraphrasing Bryson's words. He has since spun out another company called Scythe, and I would call it the tool side of Grim, right? You take a look behind me. I got my little Grim guy back there. That's actually a Halloween decoration, but he serves my purpose well. And so the Scythe is his tool, but Grim is the person. He's the personality, the service provider. So those are the two companies coming hand in hand together. And the unicorns, I think it was something that was born out of really the need for highly skilled and qualified talent in cybersecurity as a general rule, not just within our company, but industry-wide, right? And to find that perfect unicorn, which I might say both of you fellow panelists are true unicorns, right? And the reason being is it's so hard to find somebody who has the technical skill set and the ability to communicate the mission outside of their demographic, right? Outside of their community of technical professionals into that business. That's what really constitutes a unicorn, in my opinion. And so Grim has sort of built some side branding, if you will, around unicorns in our search for qualified talent to advocate the really cool experts that we have within our company as well. And on occasion, you may find our founder dressed as a unicorn from time to time, just to lighten the mood on a very heavy topic, right? Because it is zero trust, and it is, I always refer to it as the dark cloud on the technology parade, but it's a necessary cloud. So in terms of automotive or aerospace or medical devices, the dream, the innovation that the technology brings is fantastic, but we always have to be mindful of the security vulnerabilities and the security needs behind that. So to build an autonomous vehicle is amazing, but I'm not getting in it unless I know it's secure, right? And I don't think many people would. And so that's really how everything comes together into that perfect rainbow unicorn story that I think we like to tell as an industry, not necessarily just for Grimm.
And so your logo, can you describe it for the audience? Oh, there's the skeleton in the logo. That's a great shirt. So Dave, speaking of imagery and graphics, what role do you think they play in distilling complicated cybersecurity and technology information?
Yeah, I think comic strips and really comic strips it's a venue for humor, right? And I think that humor plays a very important role in building trust and also to distilling complex topics down to comics into topics that people can easily understand. You know, an example of using humor to build trust, you know, I think that there seems to be almost like this ever eternal war between like the IT audit, governance, risk, compliance side of the house and the IT side of the house, right? So it's very difficult usually for auditors to build trust with that IT side of the house because they're like, is this a performance review? Or are you gonna, you know, tell my boss all these things that I might be missing in this highly complex environment? You know, are you on I call it a turd find. So, you know, you're gonna expose this turd that I just can't do anything about because of lack of resources, right? So usually what I find when I start my audits is that the IT side of the house has a very, you know, protective, defensive posture. And I kick off every new meeting you know, by just calling it out, right? So I like to say that words never assembled and spoken by humankind. And then I, you know, talk a bit about how systems are difficult to exploit, humans are much easier to exploit, and that's how I believe, you know, I can have more thorough audits performed, and I can add more value to my clients by, you know, just very easily, again, by using humor, kind of placing that overlay of governance and why it's important on the IT stack. And everyone kind of, you know, everyone kind of comes on board at that point.
And Nina, what has your experience been, and how would you advise our audience about the role of humor in healthcare cybersecurity? Does it have a place?
I'm so glad you asked that. I literally had this conversation yesterday. So I love statistics, and I think it's 65% of doctors don't believe women's pain scale. And then the other statistic was 5% of doctors in the United States, this is all United States related, 5% of doctors in the United States are African American, and 5.8% of physicians in the United States are Latinx in some sort of fashion. For me, I have a much better relationship with one of my physicians who is a Latin woman because I don't know, I have this thing where I can talk to her like she's an aunt of mine, or she's something like my mother, and we have fun, we laugh, we legitimately laugh. And she shares some of her experiences in life with me when I'm seeing her, and we have that very open discord, which to me is extremely important because the physician I had prior to her was not a kind person and kind of told me what I should be doing with my life instead of listening to what I was doing and how we could work together, rather than just pointing a finger and telling me, you know, do the thing, listen to me because I know everything. A lot of it is about sharing the same experience, right? Because you're in that room, you have 15 to 20 minutes to have a very intense conversation. And when people start laughing about whatever is going on, they start to kind of open up, but there's that truth and jest moment. So you still have to, as a physician, move around and know where, I don't want to say know where your place is, but know where your place is in that person's life well enough to say, so I see what you're doing, and I kind of want to dig into that a little deeper because that's a conversation we need to have. You pointed something out, but then you kind of reneged on it. How do we get into that a little more? So it's also about understanding each other just as humans, rather than just that relationship where I'm the physician and I have that hierarchy and you're the patient, you need to listen to everything I say. Because at the end of the day, the patient is still that autonomous body. And if you give me the receipt, not receipt, that's what it is in Spanish. RX, prescription. If you give me the prescription, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to do it. I have to have that trusting relationship with you to say, this person knows what they're doing. They're looking out for my best interest. I'm going to do the thing. But again, every relationship, David, I don't know you, so I'm going to, but we'll know each other soon. It'll be one day. But Jen and I have had conversations where we haha and it's great. And we have our serious moments where we have to get work done. Gary and I, same thing. And there's the truth and jest, and there's the haha of we just have to get stuff done, guys. Like it's gonna suck and it may be hard, but we still got to do it, and we're gonna do it together. And at the end of it, we're gonna be together, and I'm gonna drag you through it if I don't have to, like if you don't have the fortitude, but we're gonna get through it. So having those hard conversations are part of what healthcare is about, but knowing how to have that hard conversation and making it fun and willing and part of the relationship is where it all comes together.
You know, now with additional reliance on telemedicine, I don't think people know that people have torsos. You know, how is all that going to work out? How do you convey this empathy, this understanding to patients through telemedicine?
It may just be me, but I move my hands a lot. And I know I also don't have a torso. But if I was talking to you or if you were talking to me, I can see a reflection. There are windows on the other side of you. I would say, okay, you're getting enough sunlight. Like what else is going on with your house? Earlier, we saw people walking around, so I know you have communication. There are a lot of things I can just observe from your surroundings and bring that into the conversation. The same way I'm under the stairs, and these are real stairs. These are not a background. Constantly people make fun of me that I'm in the Harry Potter phase of my life, just waiting to go to Hogwarts. But that's also an opening into further conversation of why do you sit under the stairs when you're working? And then I can go on and tell them whatever the story is. And you may or may not have a torso. I don't know. But maybe if you go get water, because can I see what you're doing, you will then get up, and I will also note that you have working legs. So options.
And Jen, when I went to RSA this year, I was really just overwhelmed when I went to the exhibit area about the sheer number and the lights and sounds and intensity of all the different vendors talking about their products or trying to get people's attention. What's your assessment of the state of things regarding marketing communications?
That's easy. We start a hacking village, just like Nina. So we have co-founded the Car Hacking Village and work hand in hand with Robert, who is the founder. So we support him quite a lot around the country at all of his car hacking villages. And we bring what we call our 3PO, which is our car hacking workbench, right? But what that enables and empowers us to do is to get that FaceTime, because now we have wizardry, we have a gadget, something that draws people in, and they want to know, their curious minds are, what is this thing with all the guts of a car hanging out of it? You know, what's going on with it? So we let the visual tell our story for us, right? And that's really what I think one of the major keys to success. Yes, our people, yes, our talent, of course, but providing that visual draw to bring people in, because something like hacking a car is very intangible, it's very abstract. Cybersecurity in general, right, is very abstract. So how do you provide a visual that tells that story or helps amplify your story? So much like the biohacking village or the ICS village, right? It brings the story to the people and it draws the people in. And that for us has been like stars and moon. It's everything. It's the galaxy is drawing those people in, because to Nina's point, when we're talking about relationships, we're talking about being relatable, right? So whether it's her doctor, and I got news for you, it's not just auditors people don't like, they don't like consultants either. You know, so when we go in and we have a conversation, I work on the business side of the consultancy. My team works on the technical side of the consultancy. But sometimes for me to have that same discussion with a C-level person about not having enough budget allocated to do a pen test or whatever the case might be, that's a very different conversation than what the tech team would be having, because engineer to engineer, they understand. But telling a compelling story for why somebody needs to give money to something that's never truly going to be fixed is a very different conversation. So having those visual aids at RSA, having that sensory overload, if you can draw them into you instead of you handing your business card out to every Tom, Dick, and Harry in the room, you're going to be far better served, right? Bring them into you. So that's how a small business like Grimm makes a large impact with a relatively, I don't want to say low effort, but relatively low effort, right? Is we can bring them into us.
Well, speaking of conferences, for the foreseeable future, or at least for a little while, they're going to be put on hold in person and they're going to be virtual. You have been involved with a very cool conference. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about that?
Oh, my conference. So in my spare time, I volunteer with an organization called the National Defense Industrial Association. We are in support of the DoD mission and the Defense Industrial Base. So my annual conference, we'll be hitting our 6th year in 2021. We're really excited about it. It's focused on cyber physical security for military platforms. So again, that can be anything. It traditionally has been about ground vehicle military systems, but we take a look at things that fly and roll on the ground in other formats than just vehicles. And industrial control systems is a major piece of that conversation, as is critical infrastructure for our Department of Homeland Security friends as well. So within this summit, traditionally, it has been a 2-day affair. That might change for 2021, being a virtual event, but traditionally it's been a 2-day affair where we fly in people from military, industry, and academia to talk about the really cool research and cybersecurity initiatives that they have in this space. And what it does is it helps translate, if you will, things that are really important and have a certain air of mystique around them for the military, and translate them into something that's more recognizable for industry. So if you want to pull industry up and have them support you, do the research with you or for you, or provide you a product solution, or whatever the case might be, you have to talk to them. So it really kind of closes that delta between government and industry and academia, where they can come and just have this really great conversation for 2 days about things that they're passionate about, and it takes the red tape out. Nobody's worried about, am I going to get a contract? Am I not? Because you're talking about the research.
Just even the expression that you use when you talk about things that fly and roll around, it's just terrific. So, Dave, as we're winding up here, is there anything else that you'd like to add to amplify your mission?
Yeah, sure. Circling back to the small business sector, I have a bold claim. I do a lot of public speaking as well. So I have a bold claim that, tends to cause my audience to kind of gasp, when I initially say it. So, so here it goes. I think when it comes to consumers and to small businesses, we've already lost the war on cybersecurity, or we've already lost the cybersecurity war, right? We're spending, the reality is that the small business sector's the hardest hit because they're the highest, they're the weakest, and they're the most likely targets by cyber criminals, yet they just don't have the budgets, bring on cybersecurity risk management consultants, or even, full-time IT staff. And I think a lot of the cybersecurity industry is really focused on, on generating profit, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? So it, turns into a mousetrap exercise. How can we build the best mousetrap to add the most value to our customers, most value to paying customers, right? We've already said that in most, very small business markets, family-owned businesses, less than 10 employees, and individual consumers, our data already exists on databases on the dark web, right? So they already have, our PII data that we can't change, like our dates of birth and social security numbers. Yet we still spend a lot of time trying to, coach, train, and preach, protect your PII, which we still, I have to pay homage to the fact that, yes, we do have to protect our PII. But the reality is that because this is such a complex topic, combined with the fact that it's a topic that requires revenue and a budget in order to really add value to businesses, that's why we find a lot of the small business sector is like slipping through the cracks. So, Nina will get a kick out of this. Like I love numbers and statistics as well. And I'm a huge Malcolm Gladwell fan. Like, I get his books the day that they come out and I just read it cover to cover, right?
Well, I mean, by the way, since you mentioned Malcolm Gladwell, one of his first books, Nina, was called Blink, but I digress.
Well, there's this in one of his books, David and Goliath, which is my favorite of the Malcolm Gladwell books. He applied the cybersecurity risk management lens to this one statement that he has in the book, and it's a really short statement. I'll read it to you because it's impacted me profoundly, and it's what led me to develop Governing Goliath Media, which is a YouTube channel that I started earlier this year. He says, I'm going to read this off my screen here. What the Israelites saw was an intimidating giant. In reality, the very thing that gave this giant his size was also the source of his greatest weakness. And I thought, aha, here's how we beat the cyber criminals, right? There's an important lesson in that for battles with all kinds of giants, the powerful and the strong are not always what they seem. So I thought, okay, well, here's the magic bullet to defeat the international, $1.5 trillion cyber criminal economy. We just have to look at the sentence, the very thing that gave the giant international cyber criminals his size was also the source of his greatest weakness. So I was like, so what is international cyber criminals, $1.5 trillion economy? What's their greatest weakness? What's the pebble in the slingshot thing that all we got to do is just shoot it and then they go away? So there isn't one, right? I can't think of one yet. We'll get to you in just a second, Nina. I see you there. I see you there. Gave up hope and despair. And there was this follow-up sentence where he says, the powerful and the strong are not always what they seem. And I said, well, that's the statement that I have to go after. It's not, the giant size was the source of their greatest weakness. It's that Goliath isn't international cyber criminals. Turns out Goliath is our use of technology. And if we can apply governance to our use of technology, that's the next step to hopefully win the next cyber war. And I got my whole YouTube channel is Governing Goliath on YouTube, post twice a week. And I just hit on all these topics around governing Goliath.
Well, thanks so much for that, Dave. And final word to you, Nina. Do you have a favorite superhero and why?
Please.
Went on a complete blank because I have comments. I have other comments. They will be so fast, I promise. So I'm doing this because on my screen you're under me. David, I think people are that one strength and weakness. So put people into that sentence and I think it makes sense. And then going back to Jen's statement with the government, because I sit on a tech transfer board, and one of the things that they do that drives me crazy is they need 3 different ways to communicate the same thing, which is the 4 quad. It's not called the 4 quad, it's called the quad chart. And then there's the bluff bottom line up front. And then there's the information paper, and it's the same information just done in different places and ways so that different people can intake that information. And it drives me crazy because it's like, why can't we just have one where everybody takes advantage of this one thing? So that was my thing. But my last piece of commentary, I don't have a favorite superhero. I have a lot of favorite books, but my favorite piece of information that I share with every single person I meet, I think it's super important, is we listen to reply. We don't listen to listen. And coming from the background that I have, that's always been the more important thing in my whole life, where if you came to me and you said, I have a problem, I will never answer you directly. I will continue to ask you more and more questions to get to your point. And I will never give you a solution because you know your life, you know your past, you know your future, you know where you want to go. The only thing I will say is, I think you have enough to make your own decision now.
Well, that is sage advice. Thanks so much for that, Nina. Jen, you have the last word.
That's a lot of pressure. Unfortunately, I do not have a favorite superhero per se, but in a more generic way, I would say that all of us as storytellers for this critically important industry are my superheroes. You know, I know that sounds a bit cheesy, if you will, but we have such an important role in not just our industry, but in society overall, that it is incumbent on us to each go out and tell the story of the work that we're doing to as many people as we can get to listen. And that's a superpower, to get people to listen to you on this topic if they're not technically inclined. So good luck to all of you. I know I need it.
Good luck to all of us. And, on that upbeat note, thanks so much to Jen, David, and Nita for this incredible show. If you'd like to be a guest on our show, please send an email to Gary@cyberheroescomics.com. Bye, everyone.
We hope you enjoyed Gary's show, Cyber Hero Adventures. Good stuff. Now, though, it's time to turn things over to our Chief Content Officer, Managing Editor, Charlene O'Hanlon, who has today's news, interview, and webinar preview.
Talking about how to build an effective cloud-native team. The article takes a look at some of the just-released Linux Foundation report statistics, the 2020 Open Source Jobs Report. It shows, among other things, that 93% of hiring managers are having trouble finding candidates with cloud-native skills, such as Kubernetes, Helm, Prometheus, and Service Mesh, and that cloud and container technologies are the most in-demand technologies aside from Linux. Based on the Linux Foundation's experiences as a vendor-neutral provider of training and certification for many of these technologies, Clyde offers some tips and tricks that, with some effort, can help organizations establish a team that can handle any cloud-native project thrown at them. We also have an article on how DevOps practices impact software development as a whole and its role in fixing vulnerabilities. What DevOps has done for application development, DevSecOps is doing for application security. This article shows the natural progression into DevSecOps as organizations build and release code faster, and the DevSec model is one in which security is purposefully implemented at each stage of the software development process, not simply a value-added component. In news, we have a bevy of announcements, including a new Code Sentry software composition analysis offering for binaries from Grammatech, which inventories third-party code used in custom applications and identifies known vulnerabilities. The company notes that the bulk of custom applications today are made up of binaries based on components developed by a third party. Code Sentry detects those components and vulnerabilities associated with third-party code, including network components, graphical user interface components, or authentication layers. It uses deep binary analysis to create a detailed software bill of materials and a comprehensive list of known vulnerabilities. The technology is one tool to help organizations in that natural progression to DevSecOps and building better quality code. Over on Container Journal, ahead of KubeCon, Cloud Native Con 20 North America in November, we have an article written by the co-chair of the conference's storage track. And he offers a glimpse into what we can expect in Kubernetes' stateful future. Though it sounds like a bad idea to run stateful workloads on Kubernetes, after all, containers are ephemeral, storage should not be. The author posits that, like it or not, Kubernetes does have a future in state. He takes a look at some of the trends that are emerging around storage in Kubernetes based on some of the planned talks, and the overall direction may surprise you. Also, on the 1-year anniversary of its rebirth as a vendor focused on application developer experiences, Docker Inc. has outlined its ambitions for the future. Just one example, the company plans to focus on the interloops between where IDEs leave off and CI platforms begin. That effort will see more prescriptive development environments and pipeline tools that can be swapped out across multiple programming languages as development teams see fit, among other things. It's a pivotal time for the...
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with two very smart people in the cybersecurity space. We're going to be talking about some ransomware attack trends. I have Keith Wojciech. I know I screwed it up. Did I get it?
That's correct, yes. Yep.
I did? Oh, yay.
Perfect.
Okay. Managing Director in Kroll's Cyber Risk Practice, and Chris Ballard, who is an Associate Managing Director at the Cyber Risk Practice at Kroll. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time talking with me today. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome. So first, why don't we set the stage here? Tell me a little bit about Kroll, and then tell me a little bit about this this research that you guys recently did on ransomware attacks.
Hi, Chris, I'll have you start with Kroll, and then I can talk a little bit about the research.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you. Kroll is an international cybersecurity presence, actually, with a large North American practice, as well as a practice in EMEA, Europe, Africa, Middle East, and APAC, the Asia Pacific region. We do incident response work, a great deal of it, as well as the proactive cybersecurity services that one would expect, security assessments, pen tests, really a range of services in that regard. And Keith is actually in a wonderfully exciting group as well, the head of a wonderfully exciting group, our cyber threat intelligence, which in my estimation and my relative newness with Kroll, I can speak from the outside as well, is a coveted position. Their ability of the team to both gain information to understand how threat actors act and the likely threats that our clients will face is really unparalleled. And that's a little bit about Kroll. Let me turn it over to Keith.
Yeah, so thank you, Chris. And like Chris said, I run a section for Kroll that does a lot of cyber threat intelligence. So I lead the team, the global response for that, and we're able to see a lot of what these actors are doing, not only through the incident response that Kroll is conducting on a daily basis. We conduct approximately over 2,000 cases a year. We take that, that information alongside research that we conduct on different aspects of the internet, whether it's dark web, deep dark web, the surface, just open and closed sources, and we compare those, and we're able to get some really good analysis when it comes to trends, ransomware, APT threats, all different types of cyber activity that these nefarious actors are conducting.
All right, so tell me a little bit about this ransomware research that you guys recently did.
So for ransomware, man, I'll tell you, starting from last December. December 2019 is kind of when the pivoting point for ransomware really spiked. And not only that, there was a group called Maze Group or Maze Ransomware, where they started to not only ransom people's data, but then taking that data and posting it on public sites for as they call it, shaming, or just a blog basically to say, hey, this is who we compromised. Here is the data. If you don't pay us by X amount of date, we're going to put more data up. And that really began the trending for this, and it really elevated the ransomware, pandemic, you almost want to say, because since then, I believe there's almost 17 to 20 different blogs or shaming sites that we see that are posting this. Now, the research we're conducting and that we're doing on a day-to-day basis is, through the casework that was coming in and these engagements, we're seeing these trends of just more complex and more really sophisticated attacks. Now, through so 2019, just to kind of go back a little bit, 2019, the largest attack vector was phishing. Phishing, that's how people got in. About 35 to 40% of all Kroll cases that we're seeing, phishing was the number one attack vector. That actually trend continues in 2020 as well. So something as simple as phishing is everyone, we know about phishing. these bad actors, they're so sophisticated, they make it so difficult to recognize this. Now, in seeing that, that's one way that these actors get in. Another way is through open remote desktop protocol, which is another attack vector really on the rise, especially from the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, everyone working from home, the vulnerabilities and the difficulties. So with it, and I know giving you a lot of background, but in seeing that, we're trying to track how these actors are and what they're doing. It's really elevated from just being able to hold ransom and pay me X amount of dollars to, okay, we're going to hold ransom, pay me X of dollars, and now we're going to post you on this blog. Then it goes to, okay, I'm going to pay ransom, pay me X amount of dollars, post on this blog, and if you don't do it within X amount of days, we're going to release more data. And then the fifth one is they're still ransoming, paying ransom, giving you a timeline, posting it, and even if you do or do not pay, there are these splinter cells that are taking some of this data and possibly posting on dark web markets for sale. So this complexity just keeps on increasing. The sophistication is really increasing. It's pretty, I don't want to say ingenious, but these guys they're on top of their game, and it's so really, I'm awestruck to see what the next thing is going to be for them, and just trying to maintain that. It's challenging, but I believe that the U.S. government and within the Kroll and the cybersecurity world, we're really trying to really fight against that.
Well, it's fascinating and frightening at the same time. Not just the level of sophistication, but the speed at which they can do it is astounding, and it seems to be growing faster every single day. And one of the things that you mentioned, Keith, is the fact that they're posting this data on websites. That also makes it a compliance issue, because now all of a sudden people's personal information is available on the internet, and that is a violation of GDPR, CCPA, and all those other alphabet soup of regulations, compliance, regulatory, issues that organizations have to deal with on a regular basis. So, it seems to me that there doesn't seem to be, I don't want to say there doesn't seem to be an easy way to really, really protect data these days, because the hackers and malicious actors are just moving so quickly and are so sophisticated in their actions. But what are some of the things that companies can do to protect themselves, especially recognizing that we are in a pandemic situation, and we're not working in our regular environments. We're not working with a lot of the regular tools that we normally do. So, what are we supposed to do basically to keep ourselves safe?
Right. Well, and you raised a really good point too, and it goes to the overall value of intel and of research, and that is, if one knows how the actor monetizes, what the actor does, commonly called the tactics, techniques, and practices or procedures of the threat actor, that informs a bit of the legal decision as well. So if, for example, you're dealing with a threat actor who does not exfiltrate, does not steal the data, and you don't see any indication of that, well, that will guide the methodology for the response and can ultimately inform counsel's decision, or guidance for the company. So what can businesses do? That's a piece of it, is make sure that the security teams are current, make sure that they have access to the best possible intelligence. The intelligence sources need to be up to date, need to be thorough. What IOCs, what indicators of compromise should I be looking for on my system? Things like that from the security team. The everyday, I'm sure as well as anybody else, that everybody knows it these days, that you can't protect your environment from phishing. It's not there's no foolproof way of doing that. There will always be the possibility that someone can be phished or spear phished. However, training is an important piece, making sure that human firewall is built, making sure that happens. There needs to be some assessment of how data is handled, where it's stored, some intelligence as to how that works. And frankly, that is as the lawyers will tell you, that is a legal requirement these days with CCPA and GDPR. There has to be thought given to that in a data registry. And finally, the tools. This can't be the second tier or the third tier of priorities. Too many of our clients' brands depend on it, too much of their intellectual property. So the tools such as good, strong endpoint defense really needs to be a part of the conversation.
So, I recently read a story about, actually it was a story that ran on our site on Security Boulevard about a company, and I'm not quite sure, I don't remember which company it was, but they were hit with ransomware. They went ahead and paid the Bitcoin, and they were fined by the FBI and the DO, I think it was the DOJ, for actually funding a terrorist organization because they paid the ransomware. Do you see situations like that becoming more prevalent? Because it's kind of a catch-22. You're either damned if you do or you're damned if you don't. So, what does an organization do in that situation? And, do you think this is something that's going to be changing anytime soon?
Oh boy, there's a lot of complexity to that one.
I know, right?
Not the least.
Leave it to me to throw the curveball.
Right. Not the least of which is the recent guidance we've seen from FinCEN, from Treasury, and first and foremost, I don't think anybody in the incident response realm, from counsel to the forensics teams to the negotiators, nobody is going to skimp on the steps that go into the OFAC check. That's a very important thing. The insurance carriers, the cyber insurance carriers, are certainly very conscious of it and insistent that it is followed. So as much as possible, that has to be continue to be the standard, that there are proper OFAC checks. But you didn't ask that. You asked, is it going to continue or escalate? Well, the number of times that our colleagues in the various federal and state government agencies and in Congress, which we've had the pleasure of speaking with some members, they all recognize that ransomware will continue as long as it is funded. You cannot simply ask a major corporation, and God forbid a financial services firm, to simply just close its doors because they don't wish to pay a ransom. The brand damage, all the other things that can go into not paying the ransom have to be considered. But I do think we're going to continue to see ramped up pressure, and as a way of dealing with the threat, if for no other reason, then we'll see perhaps the same impact that we saw that GDPR and PIPEDA in Canada had in companies getting scared of the government just as much and hardening their networks. Keith, what are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, excuse me, and it's a tough one because being former law enforcement, I was a Secret Service for 16 years. The last thing we wanted to do was go after a company that is doing that, but it's a fine line. Like Chris said, it's very fine. I mean, you got to do what's best for your business, and I think that's kind of the deciding factor. And I'm not saying breaking the law. That's not what I'm saying, but just how do you get yourself up and running correctly? If you're a restaurant, and I use this example a lot. If you're a restaurant and you get attacked by ransomware, you can still serve food. You can still take payment in cash. If you're a law firm, how do you operate? It's a completely different scenario. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis and trying to define what makes it a success for you. How do you keep on going? Because not only are you worried about the business, but all these employees as well. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis on how you decide and what's best for that particular firm or company at the time.
Yeah, I would think that with the level of I guess the profile that ransomware attacks are getting these days in the media, that more organizations would do more to protect their data and back it up and have that clean copy, if you will, available should they be struck by ransomware. So I guess I'm wondering if you guys have seen whether companies have kind of taken steps to increase their data protection efforts through, data backup and having multiple redundant backups and things of that nature. Or do you think a lot of the companies are just kind of going about their business and doing the same old thing and praying for the best and seeing what happens?
No, actually, so you have the proof in front of you that companies took steps in after the initial waves of ransomware, and that's Maze. The exfiltration model, exfiltration purely for extortion, is one born of the fact that so many companies got smart to ransomware, at least smart enough, right, to have the backups created. I say smart enough because simply generating a bunch of tape backups for 20,000 systems that'll take a year and a half to restore, it maybe isn't the greatest. So that's proof that there were steps taken that the threat actors had to develop.
Yeah, and on that, I mean, there's a variety. And Shelley, to be honest with you, like little interviews and talks like this are so important to get the message out there because we live it. We live it every day. We're dealing with it every day. We see it. Friends on the phone we're telling about, and there's a group of individuals, you would say within the world that know this. There are those that are, it's not that they don't care or they just don't have the awareness.
Right.
So making people more aware that, ransomware, in a sense, doesn't really have a face. They're going after low-hanging fruit. Some of the threat actors are actually strategically approaching, but I mean, some of these lower-level actors that are doing ransomware as a service and purchasing this, the least resistance is the best for them. And I think that there's getting the word out there that it can happen to you. It can by a phishing email or by working from home. Because think about it, February when this whole pandemic hit, everybody started working from home like starting March. Who was ready for 100% workforce working from home? If anyone was, I'd be shocked. And in saying that, you've got to build that security around that environment. And I know there's shortcuts because people needed access to certain files, and in doing that, you've created these security gaps, not on purpose, but to be able to run effectively working from home with this pandemic. So this pandemic has really led to all different types of scenarios, even in the cybersecurity world.
Yeah, I would agree. And at the start of the pandemic, that was actually an issue that I was wondering about whether we're going to see 6 or 8 months down the road if we're going to see a real issue with folks failing their security audits and their compliance audits because they did open up their networks to enable their employees to work from home. So, and the jury's kind of still out on that, but I have a feeling we're going to start hearing about that pretty soon. So, all right. Well, stay in touch with me. Let me know what's happening in the world of cybersecurity and ransomware and all that other good stuff as we move on. Love to have you guys back on the program.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the time. It's a very interesting conversation. So thank you.
All right. Great. Well, thank you for joining me today. Really do appreciate it. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community. Digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with the Thursday edition of the Webinars Preview. As always, we have a great lineup of webinars on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard, including some really fascinating ones. I'm so excited about this lineup that we have coming up for you. But let's go ahead and dive right on into the ones I want to let you know about. most of all. The first one is happening tomorrow. It's called Defeating DevOps Demons and Haunted Systems, just in time for Halloween. This one is happening at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's a DevOps Unbound roundtable event. It's featuring a cast of characters who are so scary smart, it hurts. Alan Schimmel is hosting this hour-long discussion about the demons that can plague DevOps initiatives and how organizations can exorcise those demons for a successful implementation. I hear the hippy-dippy DevOps dude is going to be making an appearance, so that alone is worth the price of admission. The next one I want to let you know about is happening Tuesday, November 3rd at 9 a.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. That's a voting day, guys. So dropping that hint there, get out and vote. But before you go do that, watch this video, watch this webinar. It's happening at 9 a.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. It's called Cyber Threat Intelligence, Highlights and Trends for 2020. This one is from the folks at Nokia. Judging from what we've seen this year, I have a feeling this webinar could go 4 hours, but this is an hour-long webinar, and they're basically going to be distilling information collected in this year's Nokia Threat Intelligence Report, looking at some of last year's or the current year's threat activity, including malware infections on mobile and fixed networks. The insights are actually based on data that was that's collected from hundreds of millions of endpoints and IoT devices that are protected by Nokia's NetGuard endpoint security solution, looking at data threat trends, including the relationship between COVID-19 and malware infection rates, the surge in IoT infections, and the top malware seen so far in 2020. Also happening Tuesday, November 3rd at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com, we have the Broadcom-sponsored Enterprise DevOps series using VS Code and Zoe. This webinar takes a deep dive into the Zoe framework for mainframes and how it can help developers with no mainframe experience to debug COBOL code and perform other mainframe-specific tasks successfully. The discussion will focus on how mainframe application development is merging with IT tool chains and processes, including CI/CD pipelines, and will include a demo, yay, of a mainframe developer cockpit designed for productivity and ready for shift-left automation. I'm so excited about all three of these webinars that are coming up, but we have a whole bevy of other webinars to choose from on the sites, both upcoming and on demand. So I encourage you to visit DevOps.com, Container Journal, or Security Boulevard, or all three, and check out the lineup of webinars that we have coming for you and that are available on demand. I'll be back on Monday with the next edition of the webinars preview. So until then, stay warm, stay safe, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Charlene, for all, as usual, great stuff today. It's now time to head over to the Analyst Corner for the analyst, Mitch Ashley. Mitchell, of course, is CEO and founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. And Mitchell has two interviews for us today. One is with Venkat Venkastramanani. I mispronounced that terribly. I apologize. Venkat, though, is the CEO of Rockset. And him and Mitchell discuss building massively scalable real-time data for the cloud. And he's going to talk about that. And then Mitchell also has a great interview with the folks at Menlo Security and Bylight Professional Services. So now let's head over to Mitch.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, I'm joined today by Venkat Venkatramanani, who is CEO and co-founder with Rockset. Welcome, Venkat.
Thanks, Mitch. Thanks for hosting me.
Absolutely. Good to have you on. So tell us a little bit about you. And we know your role, CEO and co-founder, and just a little bit about Rockset. And we'll kind of get into the area in the industry that you're addressing.
For sure. Rockset is the real-time database built for the cloud for modern data applications, for real-time applications that needs to work at massive scale without any operational overhead. Prior to founding Rockset, I was managing online data infrastructure at Facebook from 2007 until 2015. So help scale the backend online data infrastructure and real-time data infrastructure for Facebook from when it was 40 million monthly actives to about 1.5 billion people using Facebook. And so all Facebook's user-facing products were built on top of the systems that we built and managed. And the essence of what we did at Facebook was to make it very, very easy to build highly scalable and modern data applications. And so what we're doing at Rockset is really carrying over the same philosophy to make it extremely simple and elegant to build massively scalable real-time data applications in the cloud. And so that's kind of what the genesis of Rockset is all about. And happy to be here. And we're growing and we're hiring in all dimensions, and so on all sides. So yeah, very, very happy to be here and share the story with you.
Good. Well, let's talk about sort of state of the art of scalable databases in the cloud, applications that are doing real-time analytics. What is sort of that tipping point of you can do a typical SQL Server or NoSQL kind of database if you get to this point, you are going to hit the wall, or you're going to struggle to scale past that. What's sort of that the barrier of the ionosphere that before you get weightless and you're way up there?
Very good question. I think we used to say these things in terms of like scale of data and all of that, right? But I think if you really think about it, there are two extremes to data management systems, right? If you can build an application on a single node Postgres or MySQL, you should. There's no reason for you to do anything more complex than that. What you get there is speed. It's very performant. It's a single node system. You get speed in terms of development, and it's a very robust system. But what you have trouble with is scaling. The minute you need to go make that application work, and where your backend needs are going to spill over from one node to multi-nodes, you're in a whole world of trouble, right? And then on the other end of the extreme, I would say you have systems like cloud data warehouses and data lakes and whatnot, and they give you a massive scale, and they separate storage and compute and do all sorts of things, and they're very storage optimized that way. But you get scale, but if you pick scale, then you have to leave a lot of speed and cost. And so it's very slow and it's very expensive to power these modern applications. And then what modern applications are demanding, real-time applications are demanding, is both speed and scale simultaneously. It's not one or the other. And so this is where I would say there is a whole generation of applications that are now, take security analytics, take marketing automation, take customer success and support automation, and then on the consumer facing side, you talk about, on one end, real-time applications like, gaming leaderboards, where there's a lot of multiplayers and lots of games happening. And in real time, you need to be able to show an analytical view of what's happening to your end users, or it could even be a personalization engine. You could think about, e-commerce website in real time, showing you based on both your behavioral patterns on what you have been browsing around, and also some some recommendations that they're generating kind of offline in the back end, combining those things in real time and being able to present a very, very rich personalized experience for every individual buyer. And so if you look at all these modern applications, these are the ones that are on the bleeding edge. But what we really see is that these are not actually that different than applications that people have been building all along, except that now the demand for these applications in terms of speed and scale is just going enough that the traditional ways of a single node OLTP database are trying to abuse my data warehouse to build these applications. Both of them are falling apart. And so on one side, you have, you're hiring, you're picking kind of things for speed in terms of MySQL, Postgres, and then you're hiring, teams of people to operate it and build data pipelines to load data in, tune the queries, build indexes and whatnot. And you end up hiring teams and look forward to writing their performance review every 6 months. On one side, you have that problem. On the other side, you get the convenience and the scalability that a data warehouse might offer, but you're paying through the nose for compute. And also at the end of the day, even after all that spend, it is still, your queries are still like 5 to 10 seconds long, and it's not application speed.
Yeah, usually a data warehouse, you may ask questions, could do queries that can take minutes, to get a response. With that sort of speed and scale dynamic, do you also trade off structure of the data? I mean, because things like Hadoop and, more kind of data lake, data warehouse type of applications, sometimes, you're doing more free-form data analytics. Is that something that you also trade off in this process?
Extremely good question. I think you're absolutely right. I think data lakes were the only systems that were embracing large volumes of semi-structured data and still allowing you to make sense out of it. Even a warehouse would ask you to structure it before you can load into it. And this is another innovation at Rockset, which is when you write to Rockset, you literally have to only give us kind of read access, or just you can have a JSON stream coming in and connecting that to Rockset in the cloud. And what Rockset does is actually it automatically turns these semi-structured data sets coming in without any ETL or without any schema management or anything like that or structuring. It automatically turns semi-structured data into fast SQL tables in the cloud. And that allows you to now suddenly build these applications instantly that would in any other system would take multiple weeks. And so, and it is also a more modern problem. I think we're dealing with semi-structured data. Take a security analytics company, for example, or let's say you're building your own security analytics for some internal, DIY kind of an application. Your data is going to be semi-structured. The shape of that is going to continuously evolve as different endpoint monitoring systems are installed and phoning home back what they're seeing. And you can't pause the world. The performance and the power of SQL on top of these data sets in real time, and that's exactly what Rockset does.
Interesting. So let's back up for a moment, and I always love to hear the entrepreneur story. So is this an idea that all the experience that you got at working at Facebook, or I forgot where you were before that? I think you worked at Oracle for a while, if I remember right.
Yes.
Is this something sort of along the way you're like, hey, there's this gap, there's these kind of applications that are merging and we're force fitting our way of doing it and it doesn't work? I mean, so maybe I'm making up the right story here, but how did you come across this problem as something to say, hey, I'm going to go start a company and get this going?
So I saw a lot of this evolution from batch to real time in firsthand happening at Facebook. Probably a decade before all enterprises are now moving from batch to real time. And so I would say I didn't recognize it or might have articulated this well, but we saw this trend in the days of Facebook scaling when product managers were hijacking systems that we built for metrics and monitoring, for example, to do A/B experiments in real time to very quickly figure out which features to launch and which features to that needs to go back to the drawing board. And so we saw a lot of these kinds of evolution happening all the time. And another great example is Facebook Newsfeed. And so Facebook Newsfeed's original incarnation was a batch oriented system. It would go and crawl, every user's kind of, database and whatnot. And every night it will generate like a newsletter for everybody. And that was not real time. And that is not, people forget how, inadequate the original Facebook newsfeed launch was, but it would not refresh in real time at all, something that all of us now take for granted. It would refresh maybe every 6 hours or 12 hours. And the original implementation, it would only refresh every 24 hours. And then what happened was around circa 2008 is when, these kinds of real-time indexing based and real-time systems were built. But the first generation of all of them, even at Facebook that were built, were not general purpose. You could not use the newsfeed backend and build any real-time application on top of that because it did not have SQL and it was kind of like very bespoke and custom built. Mm-hmm. But then by the time I left, we were able to see that pattern all over the place, whether it was the spam and fraud fighting systems at Facebook, whether it was the search backend at Facebook, where you want to like quickly search people and things and whatever you're doing. And obviously newsfeed we talked about, and I can keep going on. The list is very, very long in terms of so many systems really wanted a massively scalable real-time kind of data backend. And after leaving Facebook in 2015, sometime around August, I spent a year not really working anywhere. And, the other, kind of the genesis for Rockset really came from the fact that I ended up spending a year recognizing that in the 8 years I was at Facebook from 2007 to 2015, the world had dramatically changed, right? There was AWS, Docker, Kubernetes, none of that existed back in 2006, 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent a year talking to anyone that would give me the time of their day, right? I had a resume that looks interesting, and so they wanted to connect. And I had nothing to sell. I had no pitch deck, nothing. And I would just go and listen. And with a genuine curiosity to understand how the world works, what are the problems that are worth solving. When I left Facebook, I had a pretty good idea on what problems are worth solving and how to solve them within the boundaries of Facebook. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of like Disney World. It's not the real world. It's kind of like, crazy problems, massive scale things. There's a whole bunch of problems that nobody else in the world has.
I was going to say, nobody else has that unique environment, right?
Exactly. And so in a year I left, I talked to banks and I talked to hospitals and, all these other systems. And again, the focus was always around data management. And the genesis of Rockset was really those interviews and walking away from more and more of those interviews, thinking, man, building a modern data application is so complicated. So many people are struggling. And I think we can build something that is way more powerful, that could be very, very helpful. And having that, because we've seen this movie before, we've seen how this is going to play and what kind of systems they're going to have to need to be able to get to the next level of applications and engaging operations and better business operations, more engaging customers, growing their top line and things like that. And so that was really the combination. So the experience that we had at Facebook, seeing this firsthand where the entire company was going from batch to real time in those 8 years, and then following up with like a lot of one-on-one conversations with people and really listening and walking away from that, realizing that there is definitely an opportunity in simplifying what it takes to build a real-time application in the cloud.
Cool. So let's talk about, you mentioned, one of my questions was going to be, here, are you selling this back to Facebook or similar kind of online services? But you mentioned talking to banks and a lot of different kind of companies. Is there a certain kind of company that's going to be more akin to using Rockset than others? I imagine, and I don't mean, 20-year-old Stone Age operate like you did 20 years ago kind of company, but people that are looking to do more massively scalable applications.
Correct. I think the first generation of companies that are, like demanding the scale and the speed that Rockset offers that no other system can, are what we call the early adopters, right? Like, I think for us, the early adopters are a whole category of companies that already live in real time. Mm-hmm. We don't have to convince them real time is better. And I'll give you some example. Gaming companies, definitely social media, e-commerce, they live in real time. Logistics, if you give them where a particular truck was 3 hours ago, it's not useful for them. They need to know what's happening right now. Security analytics, again, telling someone that, you got hacked 3 days ago is useless. And so all the companies and a lot of SaaS backends, a lot of the time people don't directly build a real-time application. They use a SaaS product that is their real-time application. And then we go and talk to the SaaS company and figure out what backend they're using. And there is a clear value that we could offer them. And so they can build a very powerful, rich, real-time SaaS application, whether it is an APM company or a security analytics company or what have you. And so we are the data backend for these category of applications. And so our early adopters are all, few things, right? The pain intensity is high. They are feeling the lack of a scalable real-time solution today. And they already live in the real-time world. And the other one is the data maturity, right? Like, I think if you still have real-time, but let's say you have less than maybe, a terabyte of data that you have to analyze and process, again, you kind of like very quickly go into a single node Postgres is good enough for me. And so even though I need real time, I can kind of like use a Postgres or a single node MySQL node as a server, as a real time database. And it'll probably get the job done if the volume isn't that high. And so the data maturity is the other thing we look for, where, a security analytics company is a great example where even if you have 5 customers, you're already dealing with, 50 terabytes of data, because there's so much machine generated data that is coming in that you have to process in real time to be able to actually offer the service and the protection that you're looking to offer as a security analytics company. And so the previous generation all used something like, Elasticsearch, as the backend. It's not really a database, but that's the only data backend that can take semi-structured data and give you some kind of analytics. Apache Druid gets spoken about a lot, which is another real-time system that does this. Both of those systems, I call them, are really built for the on-prem world. They don't give you independent compute and storage scaling. And more importantly, they don't give you full-featured SQL. And so when you want to build a modern application, you need the power of SQL to be able to do joins and window functions and aggregations and sorting and everything that SQL has to offer. And so there should be no compromise in how easy it is to be able to elegantly build a powerful application. But at the same time, also take advantage of the cloud. And in both dimensions, these systems were kind of born and built for on-prem world, which is the Elasticsearches and the Apache Druids of the world. They're very, very good systems. If I were looking for a system that I have to run in my on-prem data center, I would absolutely pick those two. And because Rockset does not work, it's born in the cloud and it's cloud only, similar to other cloud data warehouses that you may know of. And so when you come look at Rockset, the combination of the scalability and the simplicity the cloud offers, along with the full-featured SQL on top of real-time data, that's really the combination that makes this category of early adopters be able to leverage Rockset very, very quickly.
Now, do you see companies switching over to Rockset as the primary database for most or everything that they're doing? Or do you segment off a portion of your data that's really for that high volume, super scalable area? What's the better application for Rockset?
Well, a very good question. We don't see Rockset being the system of record, right? I think that will continue to be a transactional database, and you need backups and point-in-time restore, and the most important job of a system of record is that thou shalt not lose my data, corrupt my data, and those things. And so,
but handle all my transactions, right?
Handle all my transactions, exactly. Handle all my transactions, and so we have tremendous respect for systems like MySQL and Postgres that does it extremely well. It's so really, as I said, the problem comes when there is a lot of data coming in, and so suddenly, group commit optimizations don't cut it. If you can do 1,000 transactions per second in a single node, that's pretty powerful. We are looking at systems that are sending us today 1 million records a second, right? And so we are talking about massive real-time scale. And then the challenge is that if you want to just accumulate 1 million records per second and drain it into a data lake, you can already do that today. But what if you want to be able to ask questions, and the data lag needs to be, let's say 10 seconds or 5 seconds, that new data coming in, I need to be able to query them and ask advanced questions. On top of that, they also come to us and say, I want those questions to come back in 1 to 3 seconds because I'm looking to build an application. And so when we look at the scale of the volume of data coming in and the data latency and how quickly the data needs to be available for my queries, and in Rockset, we talk in 1 to 2 seconds, not like a warehouse that would say, oh, is 15 minutes good enough? We are talking about, 15 minutes good enough, go use a data lake or a data warehouse. But when you suddenly need that window to be very, very short, less than 30 seconds, that's kind of like where we excel at. And so we're not really a system of record. You should continue to use a transaction database. What Rockset would do with that is we can replicate whatever changes that are happening in your system of record in real time to the cloud. And so think of Rockset as a extremely fast, powerful replica or indexed replica of your transactional database, right? And so this is how the gaming leaderboard type of use cases happen on Rockset, where all the new games and records do get added to, let's say, MongoDB or Postgres or MySQL as your transactional database. They replicate that in real time to Rockset. And so within a second or two, you can ask a very complex analytical question, which is going to be used to power a gaming leaderboard, top 10, top 100, by geo, by game, by tournament, whatever you have. And you would be able to get that response in like 100 milliseconds or less. And that's the power of Rockset.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, tell us a little bit about what's kind of next for Rockset. Where are you heading? If you want to announce a release, that's fine. But kind of generally, what direction are you going next?
So I think what we are very good at right now is real-time applications, right? I think if you want, real-time applications, where the data latency is short and the query latency needs to be short, and you want to build an application speed. That's kind of like where we excel at. I think the next big bet for us would be to continue to make it easy for people to onboard their data sets no matter where it lives. Right. So there are there is transactional databases, world-class transactional databases like MongoDB and Amazon DynamoDB in the cloud that we already work very, very well with. You can come in and just literally give us read permissions to your MongoDB cluster in Atlas or DynamoDB, and within a few minutes we would be able to create this. So we are definitely looking to expand and make it very easy for people to onboard data no matter where it lives. And on the query side, I think we have a full-featured SQL API, and we have a massively scalable SQL API. But I think we are also starting to innovate on the modern data applications. Or often are working on Jamstack and other new kind of paradigms on how applications are even actually built. And so we're definitely looking to also make it easy. We launched a VS Code plugin, for example, recently to allow developers to easily build applications on top of Rockset. There is another feature we launched called Query Lambdas, which is to turn a SQL query, a parameterized SQL query, into a REST API in one step. And so basically the future is kind of real-time data APIs, and that you can build applications on top of easily. And so there's a lot of innovation that we're also thinking about on not only to make it easy to onboard data, but also to build very rich, powerful, engaging applications on top. And so on both boundaries, there's a lot of stuff we're thinking about in our roadmap.
A lot of interesting problems to solve, right? Well, it's been a lot of fun. Really enjoyed talking with you. I hope you'll come back, kind of keep us up to date as you continue to experience in market and take new problems, new challenges on, and see how you're doing. So keep in touch.
Thanks, Mitch. I really enjoyed this interview, and thanks a lot for hosting me.
Absolutely. Your website is rockset.com. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. You can go to rockset.com. There is a free trial, $300 trial. Anybody can start and give it a shot and kick the tires. Thank you for hosting us. And there's also in the blog, we also have an engineering blog where we talk a lot about how Rockset is actually built. A lot of technical details actually written by the engineers who built it. And so if you go to rockset.com, there's also a blog where we talk a lot about how the sausage is made. And so some of your viewers might be interested in that. And so check us out.
Very much so. Definitely recommend they do that. Great. It's been fun having Venkat Venkatarmani, who is CEO with Rockset. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Mitch.
This is Digital Anarchist.
I'm joined by Mike Hatcher, who's Chief Revenue Officer with Bylight LLC, and also with Kausik, who is CTO with Menlo Security. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us, Mitch.
Thanks for having us.
Good to have you both. So we have some really interesting news here, some pretty exciting, well, actually really exciting. DoD DISA contractor agreement announced. Love to have you talk about that. Before we do that, Mike, would you introduce yourself and a little bit about Bylight, and then of course, Kausik, if you would go next.
Mm-hmm. Copy that. So Mike Hatcher, Chief Revenue Officer for Bylight, as Mitch mentioned. We're a large defense contractor providing support to the Department of Defense worldwide, as well as a number of other federal agencies like Veterans Affairs and that sort of thing. So when you think about Bylight, you would normally think about cyber and cybersecurity, support to special operations, and our ongoing support for C5 ISR, kind of around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Kausik?
Yeah, I'm Kaushik, Chief Technology Officer with Menlo Security. Just a bit about Menlo. We started with the premise, a number of us have been in the industry for a very long time. And the company was really formed around the premise that security is pretty badly broken today. And it's been about 20 years of more or less the same thing, right? And as a cybersecurity industry, we haven't actually solved anything conclusively. So the company, Menlo, was formed, with the vision that, and if we were to reimagine security and actually solve some key pain points, especially now that we have this cloud, this infinite resource thing called cloud, can we solve something conclusively? And that's sort of how we got started. And we latched onto this concept of remote browser isolation as sort of this key pillar. We call it isolation core, that effectively allows an air gap. And so you can go to the internet and be malware free.
I think we share a like belief. Are we really solving security? Or are we just sort of patching it up? But that's a topic for maybe another time. Certainly share that. So tell us about the announcement. Who wants to kick in first? Would love to hear about this.
All right,
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go, Kaushik. We signed a contract with one of our longtime customers, the Defense Information Systems Agency, who is responsible for operating what is called the Department of Defense Information Network, or the DODIN. And that serves as many as 4.5 million people worldwide, both uniformed military, federal civilians, contractors, and others that connect to the DoD network. This contract award has been worked hard over the last 18 months by our customer at DISA, who are really luminaries in the global networks field. And both BiLite and Menlo have, partnered with DISA and their mission partners to create a capability that will truly move the needle. And as you mentioned a moment ago about security, are we just patching, or are we doing something substantially different? And you'll hear from Kaushik in a minute, here we're doing something substantially different. This is not more firewalls. It's not, all of those kind of traditional measures. It's something, it's kind of step function improvement to protect customers worldwide. And I'm going to defer to Kaushik.
Typical outsource service contract. This is he has some GWiz stuff I think is going to be, your viewers are going to find very interesting. Okay, he set you up, Kaushik. You got to deliver on the GWiz part.
That's a pretty high bar. I'll see what I can do. I think the federal government, it was really looking for a modern approach to secure remote work. And of course, COVID made that all the more urgent. And it was a fundamental restructuring and re-architecturing of their security infrastructure to provide a safe internet access to 3.5 million users. That's worldwide. That includes the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, right? And I think the fundamental idea behind Menlo, as I mentioned, is the simplest way to explain it is if you take your browser and you go to the internet, there's a high chance you're going to get infected for a number of different reasons, and everybody knows about it, right? And so what Menlo did was, and what Menlo has done, is instead of you going to the cloud directly or the internet directly, you go through us and we get your browser in the cloud. I'm oversimplifying things, right? But effectively, that's what happens. And what we've really done is sort of 3 dimensions of that. The first one is the user experience. So Mitch, when you use the Menlo platform to go to DevOps, for example, your website, you will not know that Menlo is in the middle. So the user experience component of it. The second one is really around scale. Think about 3.5 million users. That's 3.5 million browsers running in the Menlo cloud, right? If all of them are active. And let's say each one of them has 10 tabs open. That's 35 million tabs open that we have to manage, orchestrate, and do all of that stuff. So that's the scale component. And the last one is the cost component, right? We're able to drive the economies of scale to deliver a solution that holds a promise of perfect security, but it doesn't necessarily cost an arm and a leg. So the net result is you get this perfect secure experience because nothing from anywhere on the internet will ever touch you. We've effectively created this air gap between you and the internet. That's, in a nutshell, a simple way of describing it. Is obviously a lot of detail and lots of rocket science behind it, but that's sort of the very up-level version.
Well, it follows the rule of anything simple is really hard to make it simple, right?
True.
Yeah, the technical term my daughter uses is, and I'm sure you'll understand this, is it's very cool. without a doubt. And but one of the things that I would add is that if you think about if you take it to real life, Kausic, not me, Kausic could give you all the technical detail behind this, and it would be mind-numbing and impressive. But for a user who understands the risk when you're connected to the internet, right? And we all are, right? And we get an email with a link. The email looks like it's from somebody that we know, and it should, oh, I know that person, it should be fine. And I click that link, and now I've brought whatever was in the payload for that into my network, whether it's my home network in my case, or whether it's an enterprise network like the Department of Defense, information network. And in reality, what Kausic described is that now you're not bringing that in. That's all happening out, air-gapped in the cloud. It gets essentially, I'll say, defanged. I'm a Texas guy, right? So I understand words like blow them up and defanged, stuff like that. So, it defangs those threats. And in many cases, that thing never comes into them at all. So I think this kind of keeping at arm's length, this air gapping, is really, really critically important from a capability perspective.
So just to clarify, so I assume, Mike, that that your company is doing kind of the professional services part of this with the technology being supplied by Menlo Security, or is it a little more nuanced than that?
No, that's exactly right. Wisdom beyond your years, Mitch.
I have a set of dice here. Yeah, I had 50-50 chance.
That's exactly right. What we've partnered to go to market together, particularly here in the federal space. Although Menlo is a clear leader, if you look at large financial services firms and those kind of things. My focus is, of course, federal and largely defense, but their focus, their market focus is a lot broader than that.
I was going to ask, I assume you're both already in defense as a customer. This isn't the first time you're serving the Defense Department or the government as a customer. Is that correct? You've already been.
No, actually, BioLite this is one of the largest deals, right? I think we've been working on for 18 months, and they've been just a fantastic partner since the original RFP came out. The project was called Cloud-Based Internet Isolation. And since the project came out and just kind of working through the nuances, the implementation details and specific capabilities that the government wanted, all of that stuff, they've been a fantastic partner to get us all the way to this point. And going forward, like you said, there's a professional services component as well. But I will be providing all the value-added services on top of the platform, the implementation, things like that.
18 months. I've done my fair government contracts. That's pretty good. Congratulations on 18 months.
Well, the best part of that, Mitch, and not to cut you off there, the best part of that is it wasn't 18 months of working on, let's get a contract in place and the terms and specifications. In those 18 months, we've actually prototyped, and we have the first 100,000 defense users are already benefiting from this capability. So we did a prototype. The customer evaluated this. This isn't something we sold and said, trust us, this is going to work. We showed them through performance and hard work, and the 99.995 or plus, uptime and all those things. So if this was more than a kick the tires thing, they've actually seen it live and in production. We have customers who are using it every single day.
Yeah. Well, the Defense Department doesn't mess around, right? There's a lot at stake, and having been through that process, I appreciate exactly what you've been through or something like it. Did you have to set up a separate kind of instance, if you will, for the DoD network version of this, so it's running separately from your other services that Menlo Security offer?
Yeah.
Kind of intermix? I imagine it's something separate.
Yeah, the Menlo Security, we have a multi-tenant platform that has a global presence, and Department of Defense is basically leveraging that just based on clearance levels and impact levels, et cetera. They were actually okay with sort of leveraging that shared common platform just based on the impact levels that they have, right? But the biggest advantage is by going with that, they actually get a global footprint. So these 3.5 million employees, no matter where they are in the world, they actually get the great experience from a user experience and latency perspective. but at the same time, the security is consistently sort of, there's an umbrella security no matter where the user is.
Mm-hmm. And they benefit from your investment you've already made. Don't have to wait for you to build it. So it's there today.
Correct. I mean, that said, we are going through the FedRAMP certification and some of those things that you would expect, especially as we sort of go broader with ByLite into the other agencies. We are getting those things done.
Mm-hmm.
Mitch, you hit on a key point there, which, in the scalability issue, really, if you think about for the Department of Defense, and that network's probably the second largest in the world, next to the internet itself.
Mm-hmm.
So scalability was a key factor, and the Menlo solution really is unique, I think, in the way that it leverages that global infrastructure to deliver the service closest to where that customer might physically be sitting. So the scalability, I think, was a big issue.
Excellent. How long is this contract for? Is this a 5-year or longer? Or?
It's a 1-year base with 4 1-year options, but we expect it to be 5 years. I think this is a capability that you would expect would not be temporal. That it is the kind of capability you would expect to see as a permanent part of the infrastructure over time. But our contract is for 5 years to start.
Okay, great.
I'll give you just on that note with what Mike just said, right? There used to be a time when you deployed certain devices or appliances in the enterprise. It was sort of, you deploy and then forget about it. There's been process of products like that, right? And I think increasingly things have gotten more and more and more complex, where people are just, you're just struggling to deal with the alerts and trying to manage all of these policies. And on top of that, these are not actually stopping any threats, right? There's always the question of, whenever the threat's going to happen. So I think in some ways, this isolation core delivers that peace of mind, because once you set things up, you're going to be completely immune to the threats from the internet. And so I think that's a big part of that appeal. And we have multiple customer proof points, even on the enterprise side, where people have deployed, 8 out of the 10 banks use us, 4 out of the 5 credit card companies in the world use us. And they're, largely just breach free. Which is not something that you hear at a security company. 100% security is like this mythical thing that nobody talks about it, but we actually back that up with a $1 million warranty. If you isolate and use a product in a way that we recommend that you do, you will be completely immune from any sort of web-borne threat.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about some of the use cases. We're speaking on an unsecure channel here, so, but and can't speak for anybody else's clearance level. Can you give us some ideas, some use cases that you've maybe prototyped as part of the experience there you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, not specifically to the Department of Defense deal, but in general, I can maybe talk about what enterprises are trying to do, right? They're trying to move to the cloud along with the security benefits that it offers. And in the process, they want to upgrade their security. They're not satisfied with the status quo. They want something better. And that includes, how you manage things and the less number of alerts and better efficacy and stuff like that, right? And then from a use case perspective, there's really 3 things that are happening around the world from an enterprise perspective, which is customers want a safe internet for their employees, no matter where you go on the internet, right? They want perfect visibility and control of SaaS applications that are commonly used by a lot of these organizations. And the last one is, especially in the COVID era, VPN is becoming a pretty big choke point. So they want to have zero trust access to their internal applications without necessarily dealing with clunky VPN hardware, right? And right at the start of the COVID, that was a problem that we saw across the board, where VPN infrastructure is typically spec'd for about maybe 5-10% workforce. All of a sudden, everybody's working from home, and these things are catching on fire. That became the choke point in the hub and spoke model. And so those are the 3 broad sort of mega trends, if you will, that a lot of the large organizations are facing. And something like what Menlo is doing with this isolation core that sort of gives you that guaranteed, security and guaranteed performance and latency, that's been incredibly, positive in a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. Mike, I don't know if you had something specific to add about the use cases there, depending on how much you can talk about it.
Yeah, well, without talking specifically on behalf of the Department of Defense, I will say that, in our own testing and in what Menlo is doing in the commercial environment and that sort of thing, I mean, we have seen 50% reductions of utilization at the VPNs, for instance. And if you think about, all the companies that have gone almost 100% virtual, that was a substantial challenge early in COVID. So, that's one of the things you get with this isolation core, with the isolation solution. The other thing is that, in many cases, security was built where, folks, and, whether that be Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, or, a commercial bank, people, at least logically sit inside a secure perimeter. And you're built like that, right? And you provide access out to the internet. In a span of days, we flipped that script, and now everybody's outside on the internet, reaching in, to the corporate networks. And then, you bounce into the corporate network and then bounce out to the internet, to do things you would have done before, and back and forth. So that the amount of traffic, not just VPN, but the amount of traffic that has been, the increase that was seen is substantial. And, when you have this isolation solution in place, you eliminate probably 70% of that. So you can talk about bandwidth savings being tremendous and reducing the load on the VPN and all those things. At the end of the day, it still does come down to reducing the threat surface in many respects. The most common threats that any enterprise network, whether it be a commercial or a military network, face are, users who are either tricked into doing something they didn't want to do, or we don't want them to do, and that sort of thing. It's hard to deal with the human factor, and in some ways, the way this technology works, we insulate the users and protect them in ways that were not possible before.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious. Again, not speaking of DoD specifically, some people are talking now that thanks to COVID, it's accelerating the death of VPNs, right? We're moving to alternative type solutions. I've been in IT long enough to know that nothing ever goes away. So we will never fully kill VPNs, even if they're on their way out. That's a different argument. I'm curious though, besides volume and activity that are going through, a solution like yours, what do you think the next challenge is going to be? So we're putting more folks onto your platform. They're going through this protected environment that's helping secure the end users. Yeah, at the same time, we're increasing the kind of phishing threats that people are getting. The next thing we'll see is vaccines. Sign up for get the front line to get your vaccine or whatever. It's always something new in security, and that's not going to change. What do you think is the next thing that either, whether it's the Defense Department or enterprises are going to be facing that you can help them with?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the three broad trends, right? I think it's going to the internet safely, accessing SaaS applications that are also in the cloud, and turning around and accessing applications that are internal to the data center. So this whole VPN model that Mike was talking about, I think the challenge was you have to, in order to get to those three applications, you have to VPN into the corporate, because that's where the security stack resided historically. But, even in the case of Department of Defense, like 70-80% of the traffic, streaming media and broad internet surfing, there was really no need for it to go through the VPN to get out, but they were forced because the security stack stayed there. And so people try to cut off the VPN and go direct, your kid's iPad or your whatever machine you're working on from home on that time of the day, and that there was no control or visibility with the split tunnel model. And that's why having the security in the cloud sort of gave you a consistent policy, no matter what device you were using, where you resided, where you are in the world, it doesn't really matter. So I think that's really what we're delivering. And then, we've talked a lot about the web, and I think you brought up a really good point, which is email, right? Email continues to be a largely unsolved problem. And here again, I think we've had some really, really good success in the marketplace. And our whole thesis is when you click on a link in an email or when you're trying to open an attachment, if we can somehow bring you into our cloud, into the isolation core, we can keep you safe. And so we actually have an email product as well that basically, as you get emails, when you click on a link, it's able to now open those links in our cloud. And so that way we can also provide you protection against phishing, right? And the challenge with phishing is, and there's a whole class of other problems that go with email, The challenge is phishing is it's not as clear cut as malware, right? It's like a PayPal lookalike site, then you're going to fall for it. And so this isolation core, ideally, you know, it gives you that protection, whether you're coming from an email, whether you're coming from a web. And again, we have a number of customer success stories that go with it as well.
All right, Mike, thoughts on that?
Well, you know, I used to be an engineer in the old days, right? So I actually knew stuff, you know, and nowadays Calsic's forgotten more than I will ever know about current technology. But I tell you what was interesting to do is to, and I'll pick on either, you know, I could pick on my poor wife and say, you know, when she goes to AOL.com, and you will totally laugh about that, right? Or, you know, or you go to CNN.com. But if you look at the scripts and the scripts that are being executed there, if you, you know, and with the Menlo engineers, I've sat before, and you go to CNN and you see literally scores and scores and scores of scripts and the hundreds of commands that are being executed every time a user goes to a website. And then you get the magnitude of the risk for every single website you go to, and which was interesting. And then you look side by side at what that set of commands looked like, you know, when Menlo executes it in isolation. And instead of being, you know, hundreds of pages long of commands, it's on a single screen. And you immediately see everything's been disabled. The end customer doesn't really realize it. It's rendered to them. It looks, the links in the page work like they're supposed to. It, you know, from their perspective, in some cases, we're finding customers who say, wow, this is actually faster. It didn't, not only is there no latency, it's faster than what I was doing before. And that's large part. But when you look behind the covers, that's where you see the risk reduction and kind of what's happened. So when you ask about kind of what's next, right, the threats will evolve on the internet and the web. There's no, and they always do. So you're in this kind of, you know, whack-a-mole, you know, where's Waldo world of, you know, what's coming next and how do I deal with the next zero-day threat? Using isolation, you know, those new threats will come and they will emerge, but they're not coming into my enterprise. I'm going to keep them out. And
well, it's also in the cloud. When the new threat comes out, you don't have to roll out across your data centers or network.
No, we do. I mean, this is, you hit it.
Yeah.
That's the best part, right? The whole point of isolation is, if you look at the security model, we briefly talked about it. Again, thanks for bringing that up. It's largely around detecting whether something is good or bad, and then trying to allow or block. That's the game we've been playing for a long time. And what isolation basically says is, we're going to assume everything is bad all the time. And all we're really doing is we're taking a bulk of what your browser is doing locally, we're just moving it to the cloud with the assumption that we're not going to let anything come to you other than sort of the benign, you know, the web page content, if you will. So no active content from any of the websites you go to that ever touches you. And because of that, we're somewhat future-proofed against new types of attacks that are going to come in because we just don't care, right? You can go to a page that's serving malware, and you can go there just fine, just like you can go to CNN or any other website out there. So really, I mean, this is a true zero trust model that we're bringing to the market, or we just assume everything is bad all the time, and we don't even try to play the game of trying to figure out whether this is good today or bad tomorrow, right? And I think that's really future-proofs us. And case in point was that there was a couple of browser zero days that just recently came in. I think IE was one of them. And Microsoft, released the whole patch, and typically organization will have to like panic and go try to patch all the endpoints. And you mentioned patching earlier on, right? And this is the game we're playing. And with Menlo, I mean, I joke around, but literally we had a big yawn and we took a nap because nothing, it didn't really matter that there was a, IE 0 day because all of our users were protected by design, not because we're better at detection, but because you never come into contact with the website and hence you will be secure.
Well, good. Anything else we haven't hit on about the announcement? Love talking about this with you.
Nothing from my perspective. I will just, I'll end where Calsic started, which is this partnership with ByLite and Menlo Security has been a really good one. You know, we didn't just stumble into this. I think everybody kind of looked and said, you know, what is the kind of technology that we could introduce here that really is worthy of protecting the warfighters. And then, to that, I think we brought, so Menlo Security brought the technology that we thought was the best anywhere. And then I think we brought, a deep intimacy and understanding of how these global networks work, particularly as they relate to defense. And so it's been a great marriage and a good partnership. And, we look forward to, defending and, keeping safe our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on the announcement, and good to hear that somebody there had their security system turned on. So congratulations.
That would be me. I had to quickly go on mute, but yes.
Haven't we all? Haven't we all?
I thought my 8-year-old would be the one causing the noise. It didn't work that way. So.
Oh yeah, I have delivery people and 2 dogs to bark at them. So there's plenty of opportunity.
That's right.
For sure.
For that. Well, gentlemen, really appreciate having you both on. It's been a lot of fun talking with you, Kasich from Menlo Security, and Mike, you from, tell me, did I get it right?
Yeah.
Okay, I hope I said by line. I think I said by line. I got it right.
Yeah, and your business would be the by line, right?
By line, exactly. No, I can't end without asking you, Mike. So I used to live in Texas. It's been a while, so I don't know what's happening in Texas. But when I met people from Texas before, of course, we don't shake hands now because of COVID, but before you shook hands, you said, "What barbecue?" And then once I knew you were okay from a barbecue, then I'd know whether to give you a firm handshake or not. So what barbecue, Mike?
It's brisket, of course.
Brisket?
Yeah,
well,
it's brisket, of course. I mean, it's going to be, there's, right. You got it.
Sauce or
Even
rub?
in Texas, there's only one kind of barbecue.
In Texas, my kind of barbecue, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, there's Wayne's here in Colorado. If you're ever in Colorado, it's market style. Just awesome. And he's from Texas, of course.
I'll make a note of that.
There you go. I hope I get to share some barbecue with you guys or any other kind of food with you guys sometime. So thanks. It's been really good. And seriously, congratulations. Wish you the best with the business contract.
Be safe.
Yeah.
All righty.
Okay, thanks, Mitchell. Great stuff today. Next up, we're going to do a channel roundup. We only got one, though, today. I know we usually do them in double-barrel doses. But Mike Vizard has an interview with Ruth Sahuli, Director of the Open Source Program Office for Red Hat. And let's hear what Mike and Ruth have to say.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Ruth Sahuli, who is the Director of Community Outreach in the Open Source Program Office. Ruth, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
One of the things that you guys did is you just published this participation guide. And I was hoping you would explain to people, A, what is a participation guide, and B, why the timing now? I mean, it looks like, you guys have had some sort of guide before. Maybe it just wasn't published. I don't know. Was there some sort of secret handshake that you had to have to get in the program or what? But walk us through what's going on.
This document is Red Hat's policy, so to speak, for how associates participate in open source projects. And the reason I say policy, so to speak, is because it's almost an anti-policy in a sense. It's the little restriction as possible. So I could summarize the entire document in just a few words. It says, go contribute. Other companies do sometimes have these documents in one form or another, particularly when they have a lot of folks who do contribute to open source projects. They often look rather different because Red Hat is an unusual company, if not the only one of its kind. And so we don't worry ourselves with a lot of the concerns that some companies that are creating more proprietary software have. Their concerns with things like compliance and so forth that we address in this document. Really, the only thing that we do outline a restriction around is that if you're asked to go sign a third-party agreement, a CLA that we haven't seen before, we ask that you just pass it by the legal team. But we do maintain a list of very common ones so that that is not a hurdle for folks who are contributing to fairly common popular projects.
All right.
As for timing, it's a brand new document. It is not a new version at all. So this has been longstanding company, just general understanding since as long as we've been in existence. I've been at Red Hat for 13 years, and it's always just been understood that we would like people to go contribute to projects. And
like the common law project, right? So now it's being put into actual words.
Yes, so that's exactly what it was. As the company grew, as I've been at the company from 2,000 employees up to where we are now, not everyone has that same just general knowledge understanding when they come in the door. They're coming from places that maybe did have more restrictive policies. And so it was a good idea for us to really put it in writing, what we thought everyone understood, but probably they didn't actually all know. So we use something called the Open Decision Framework, which is something Red Hat does for decision making. It is an application of open source principles to decision making. So we use those ideas of collaboration and transparency. So this document was actually written by the whole company. I wrote the first draft with the help of our legal team, but then opened it up to anyone to make comments, additions, because it's not up to me to decide what everyone thinks is the way that we contribute to open source projects. I wanted to be sure that everyone agreed that this is the way we contribute to open source projects.
Does it matter what the open source project is? Is there any restrictions on the project, or can people contribute anywhere they want?
Absolutely does not matter. In fact, we explicitly say to employees that we don't care what the project is, as long as you are contributing to open source. That's what matters the most.
Does the document apply to IBM as well now, or just Red Hat, or are you going to?
No, we operate separately. So this is for Red Hat associates specifically.
Okay. What's your sense of how has the open source community evolved or changed in the 13 years you've been doing this? Has it become more innovative? I mean, I think back in time, a lot of people thought open source, basically they were copying some commercial project somewhere, and then they were making it less expensive and more accessible. And now I look around and I see, it almost seems like everything that comes down the pipe that's interesting has some sort of open source project wrapped around it. So how's the world changing from your perspective?
For sure. So I actually first started using Linux in the late 90s, I think, and came to Red Hat around 2007. And in that sort of frame of time between late 90s, early 2000s, you're right, there was sort of a perception that open source software was often a clone. Here's the version of the real thing, so to speak. Except in many cases, and even more so today, those open source versions were actually better. And I think as more companies have seen the value of open source, so we're seeing a lot more companies participating in open source than we were back then, for sure. As they're seeing that value, everyone is seeing that value in open source software. And so I hear a lot less describing open source software as here is the open source version of something, and simply here is this awesome project. Here is this great tool for doing whatever it is you want to do.
Do you think some folks are still intimidated by open source projects? They don't know where to get started. There isn't a place that's, there's not an easy onboarding kind of thing that says, hey, this is the people you need to talk to. This is how you get involved. Is there work to be done on that front?
Oh, absolutely. I tell people that I was a user of Linux and open source software for way too many years before I had any understanding that it was something that I could be a part of. And particularly for folks who have contributions to make that are not code, they don't see a clear path in. They think that it's something that developers do and don't understand that there are so many opportunities for writers and artists and people who want to do QA work. There's a role for almost anyone. So the Fedora project has what I think is a really cool website that attempts to address this problem. I believe it is whatcanidoforfedora.org, but sometimes I misremember all of the words, so you might double check me there. But what it does is show you a screen that says, I want to write, and you say yes or no. And if you say no, it says, I want to make art. And when you finally click yes, it shows you the ways that your skills can be useful to the project and the places that you can get involved in Fedora. I think that's a really clever way to help bring people in, to help show them that there are many ways they can contribute. There used to be an amazing project called OpenHatch, which isn't around anymore, but it had a fantastic tool called Bite-Sized Bugs that I thought was really great for showing people, here's a small thing that you can do to get started on this project to begin contributing. I would love to see something like that happen again. It is something that we think about in the open source program office, how to make entry into contributions easier for folks. And I would love to hear the general community's ideas. If you have thoughts on that, please feel free to reach out to me.
What does the open source program office do exactly at Red Hat? Because, well, if the document just says, just do it, aren't you pretty much done?
Wouldn't that be great if we were just done? Everyone go contribute and it's over. So a lot of companies have open source program offices. OSPOs are kind of trendy these days. Red Hat's is a little different in the same way that this document is a little different. So many OSPOs are concerned with compliance and various other issues that we are less concerned with. We actually simply exist to make open source projects more successful, anything that we can do to help them. And so, for example, I manage a team of folks who helps with almost anything that's not code, really. So I have a designer and someone who works on documentation. And we do health audits of projects every year so that we can help them find the things that they might need help with. We don't necessarily demand then that they ask for our assistance, but we help them identify where they could use some help. And if it's something that we're not equipped to deal with, so if it's a serious legal issue, we direct them to the legal team, of course, or whatever team in Red Hat might better be able to help them.
Are you seeing newbies contributing to open source projects, or do they think that somehow or other you have to be this massive 10-year veteran to qualify to contribute? Or, is there any kind of changes in the demographics that you've seen in people contributing to open source projects over the years?
Well, all of those 10-year veterans had to start one day. And so I think in lowering the barriers to contribution, anything we can do to help people see the opportunity that they can have that day one so that one day they're 10-year veterans is fantastic. I think we are seeing more and more diversity in open source projects. I think that open source projects are becoming more welcoming to diverse groups of people. And we have a long way to go for sure. We have a lot of things that we could improve in any project, but we've also come a long way. And I think that's to be celebrated.
All right, cool. What is your best advice to people who want to participate in an open source project right now? What do you know now after 13 years that you wish you knew a decade ago?
Well, so simply the fact that I want people to know that there is a place for them, regardless of what their skill set is, what their interest is. There is an open source software project for just about anything in the world. It's not all Linux and middleware and cloud and all of that. One of my personally favorite recent discoveries is a project called InkStitch. So it's a plugin for Inkscape to turn art into embroidery designs, which is an incredibly locked up proprietary world. So anyone who has an embroidery machine knows that it is as closed as it absolutely comes. So when I found this project, I was super excited that somebody was working on it. So I would tell people that no matter what your interests are, there's a software project for you. And no matter what your skill set is, there is a way for you to contribute to it.
Great. Hey, Ruth, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts, this is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Hey, thanks for sticking with us today. We hope you found everything interesting, useful. And, the top of the show, I spoke about Halloween. Just a quick reminder for our roundtable happening tomorrow for DevOps Unbound. Go to DevOpsUnbound.com, and you can register from there. But you know what? There's another big day coming up next Tuesday for those of us here in the U.S., and that's Election Day. I know many of you have probably already voted, whether it be by mail or early voting. But if you haven't voted yet and you're able to do so, meaning you're registered, this is an important election. I don't really care who you vote for. I have my own preference. But I don't care who you vote for. But vote. because if you don't vote, you don't have standing to complain about what goes on in this world and in this country. So please, make time. If you haven't done so, if you can, still vote early. If not, make time on Tuesday and vote. It's the most important thing you can do. Until then, though, we will be back on Monday with fresh content. I'm reminding you to vote then, too. But until then, have a great weekend. Have a happy Halloween, but do it safely, right? Be well, be safe, be secure, be strong, tech strong. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.